What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty. Join my Discord if you want to chat and share your thoughts, the link is in the description. 7WP Chapter 166 Flickering Shield. Lin who does not suffer. Los Angeles, Shining Star Building, Chairman's Office. At this moment, Lin has just finished inspecting the construction of Taro's City of Stars. The results made him very satisfied. It took more than a month, plus a large number of construction workers with soil abilities. Most of the construction of the entire City of Stars has been completed. An architect leads a construction worker with Earth-type abilities, and as long as he is properly directed, he can build a rough framework in an hour. Spend another half hour and trim some details, not for inconvenience. If it is to build a high-rise building, it will take a day to work together with more than a dozen construction workers with Earth-type abilities, and it can basically be completed. With such efficiency, such speed, and Lin's willingness to spend a lot of energy to help him restore or grant powers. This is the result of building most of the city in 1 month. As for the construction of the city after the completion of the city, those construction workers with the ability of soil, with a little training, can become a power user with the ability to fight. Although I can't say how good it is in combat, it is enough to protect the city. No matter how bad it is, they can be allowed to participate in other construction activities in the future, and it is still very easy to make money with the soil type ability. As for, if you are unwilling to join the Shining Star Group, you are unwilling to obey the arrangement. Well, it's not impossible. According to the contract signed in advance, Lin can take back the power seed. As long as he pays a certain price, he can completely transfer this power seed to others, so that they can have new soil-type powers. As for myself, Lin guarantees his health and a sum of money at most, and finally signs a sealed contract and everything will be fine. After this set of procedures, no matter what the other party chooses, Lin will not lose. Instead, it's just the difference between earning more and earning less. And this time he returned to Xingyao building because someone made an appointment. More importantly, the person who made the appointment has a special status. Or rather, the other party is Phil Coulson and Natasha Romanoff of S.H.I.E.L.D. Lin's relationship with these two is not bad, plus, their origin is also roughly guessed. After all, he purchased a lot of building materials and signed a lot of contracts. Although he was secretive, he could never hide from those forces who were always watching Xingyao. You must know that this involves the construction of a city, and the cost of materials alone will cost 500 million yuan, not to mention labor costs, which are quite a lot. Advertisement only this time it was S.H.I.E.L.D. which surprised him. He thought Tony was going to ask a question ahead of time. After all, Tony also had a stake in Xingyao, so he couldn't hide such a big move. With Tony's curiosity, coupled with the relationship between the two, he would definitely come over to ask, or to be concerned. If it was Tony, Lin in the back could have a good talk with him. In particular, Tony's weapon research and development ability, Lin values it very much. You must know that in the original final battle of the Marvel world, he developed a machine that travels through time. As well as carrying warframes such as infinite gems. And let him prepare weapons research, maybe the weapons he developed can also shine in the later dimension invasion. Well, this time Tony didn't look for him, so next time Lin will look for Tony. But first, let's talk to S.H.I.E.L.D. after a while. Bang, 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 there were knocks on the door one after another, sounding regularly. Come in. As soon as Lin finished speaking, the door to his office was pushed open, led by his assistant, followed by Phil Coulson and Natasha Romanoff. Lin waved, the assistant quietly left, and then pointed to the opposite chair to the two of them. Phil Coulson and Natasha Romanoff were also polite and sat down directly. Immediately, after a moment of silence, Lin spoke first, jokingly. Tell me, what did Nick Fury call you here for? It's impossible for you two to be my assistants. Natasha Romanoff and Phil Coulson looked at each other. Natasha Romanoff spoke directly and said softly. Lin, the director has put a lot of thought into you Xingyao recently. Just because you bought a lot of building materials, S.H.I.E.L.D. sent someone to interpret the complex for you. Hearing this, Lin raised her eyebrows involuntarily. He also wondered why Tony didn't find it first, so it could be S.H.I.E.L.D. Then keep listening to Natasha Romanoff. Our director said that for our partners, we will try our best to help. 99. Good guy. Why does this get more awkward the more I hear it? Advertisement Lin thought to herself, and immediately reached out to stop what Natasha Romanoff was going to say. Let her continue. I am afraid that Cheng Xingyao owes S.H.I.E.L.D. a lot of favor. Said directly. Okay. We are all familiar with each other, let's talk about the purpose directly. Let's talk if we can. If we can't, we won't hurt our feelings. It's time to cooperate and make money. Phil Coulson heard it and said softly with a smile on his face. Mr. Lin, we're here this time, as long as the chief wants to help you. 55. Our chief said what he said. S.H.I.E.L.D. has a lot of resources in the city's construction. It depends on whether you need cooperation or not. Having said that, Carlson stopped his words, as if he stopped to let the enemy think. Lin, on the other hand, tapped the table with her middle finger regularly, making a thump, thump, thump. After coming over for a while, as if he had decided what to say, he spoke directly. Some time ago, our Xingyao saved the whole Earth. 99. Otherwise, it is not certain how many people want their souls to perish now. The two people on the opposite side looked at each other, as if they knew Lin's routine, and made a sound of listening. Lin, looking at their status, smiled and continued. I remember talking to Phil Coulson earlier. In this world, there is only technology, but also magic and transcendence. Since the two countries will fight each other, then, there will also be battles between the two worlds. You, SHIELD, at most, protect the interests of the United States, 35. And we, Xingyao, safeguard the interests of the extraordinary world. For example, the Sorcerer Supreme, who protects the Earth, his job is to prevent the dimensional Mephisto from invading the Earth. And some time ago, our Xingyao also solved the Latitude Invasion event, 35. Our goal is to. The Eater of Souls, Chapter 167 Shameless Shield, Dimensional Invasion. When Lin said the three words Eater of Souls, his expression was very cautious. Opposite Natasha Romanoff and Phil Coulson after hearing. A look of surprise flashed in his eyes, and he continued to listen. Seeing their expressions, Lin didn't say anything and continued to speak lightly. You may not know the group of Eaters of Souls. Paragraph mark. They belong to a typical extraordinary species, an extra-dimensional life. Saying that, Lin tapped the desk heavily, made a clear sound, and then meditated inwardly. Scene reconstruction. In an instant, Natasha Romanoff and Phil Coulson noticed a change in their surroundings. I have come to the mountainside of a black mountain. The terrain is similar to a cliff, and there is a huge amount of cave in front. On the surface of the cave, there seems to be a layer of faint red seal, and this seal is very broken. At the same time, a large number of bat-like monsters flew out of the cave. Immediately afterwards, a figure with a height of nearly 100 meters was seen passing through the seal cave. Huge amounts of fleshy wings stirred up a gust of wind, and a sharp roar immediately resounded through the heavens and the earth. Immediately after, more than 10 slender tails swayed through the space and rose to the sky with it. Compared with the monster just now, its size is dozens or even 100 times the size of the former. Its body looks a little shriveled, and its limbs with claws are slightly curled up. What is even more bizarre is its head. There are two pairs of black horns on its head, a pair of extremely small eyes on both sides, and a huge and terrifying mouthpart occupies half of the head. It's terrifying. The screen stops at this moment. Lien, who was opposite them, looked at their surprised expressions, and said unhurriedly, in a flat tone, as if introducing something. This is the Soul Eater, the life of a different dimension. The leader is the Soul Eater King. One of their most obvious traits is that they devour souls, and ordinary weapons and even ordinary supernatural powers can't do any harm to them at all. 99. Saying that, Lin turned his fingers, and a picture emerged in their eyes, and they continued to hear what others said. Advertisement. Like your SHIELD's guns, even rocket launchers. If you hit these Eaters of Souls, it will look like this. 35. The parts that hit split instantly, and then, immediately, integrate together as if nothing had happened. Does no harm other than knocking them back a little distance. And the leading Soul Eater King. Right here, Lingzi said that the huge amounts of Soul Eater King said lightly. Even if you drop a nuke, you're not necessarily going to be able to damage him. Only supernatural power, a powerful supernatural power, can pose a deadly threat to them. Having said that, Lin looked at the two people opposite and said word by word. You think that with the strength of your shield, you can resist them? Natasha Romanoff and Phil Coulson looked at each other silently, silent. Although they doubt the authenticity of the whole thing, according to what they know about Lin. Although he may exaggerate or even render horror. But, there is no problem with the information, it's just the way it's told has changed. But despite this, according to the information provided by Lin, the Soul Eater King, shield in his mouth does not have any resistance ability, and it will indeed cause a huge amount of disaster. In a sense, everything Lin said was true, but then, they thought about it and found that this matter seemed to be completely resolved, and they did not come to talk about this matter. So, Phil Coulson said flatteringly, Mr. Lin, you stopped another major disaster, and I'll give the director credit for you. Hearing this, Lin raised her eyebrows, the meaning inside and outside the words seemed a bit strange. Immediately afterwards, Phil Coulson's tone changed, and he seemed quite curious. Mr. Lin, I would like to ask, where are these monsters not found? This black mountain is very eye-catching, and it stands to reason that our shield should have collected relevant information. But from my brain, I can't find relevant information. Advertisement, can you briefly explain it to us? Hearing this, Lin glanced at Phil Coulson on the opposite side with a playful expression and said lightly. Everything has been said, this is a dimensional invasion event. Backquote. Then here is the frontline battlefield. It's one of the closest places on Earth to different dimensions, and it's also considered a secret space in space. We are guarded by Xingyao to resist the invasion of different dimensions. 35. Hearing this, Phil Coulson's expression changed slightly, and then he said quite righteously. Mr. Lin, to protect the world, we SHIELD have to do our part. Please take us to the frontline battlefield and make due contributions to the resistance to dimensional invasion. Well, Phil Coulson heard what Lin said, but he still didn't understand. This time, he bought a large amount of building materials and prepared to build a city-like fortress. The destination is in this secret space. As for It doesn't matter whether it is against dimensional invasion or not, the most important thing is to enter this space secret. See where exactly, what's so special about it? Why does Xingyao Group, Good Zhao Zhao, occupy this place? And it's enough to listen to the argument of resisting dimensional invasion. Don't they understand this routine? If he didn't guess wrong, the benefits here would be astonishingly large. As expected of S.H.I.E.L.D., pull out a righteousness, such as S.H.I.E.L.D. claiming to maintain world peace. Hearing Phil Coulson's shameless words, Lin's eyes twitched slightly. So, no matter what, you have to take a bite, or it doesn't fit the character of S.H.I.E.L.D. Actually, the bad thing is that the sentence won't do. Immediately, he patted his palm, and said with a sigh. Although he knew that S.H.I.E.L.D. has always been shameless, so he had already expected it, but when he heard this in person, he was still speechless. Chapter 168 Life in Another Dimension. Weak S.H.I.E.L.D. As expected of S.H.I.E.L.D., I have been working hard to protect the Earth. Phil Coulson and Natasha Romanoff pretended not to hear the sarcasm in Lin's voice and nodded casually. Then, Lin said lightly, joining the front line is okay, but, 35. Having said this, Lin shook his head slightly, as if feeling quite emotional. You are not strong enough. For example, the Eater of Souls this time, your fighting skills, guns and ammunition can't cause any damage. And a low level of extraordinary power can't cause fatal damage to it. This time, the main force is me and our company's combat backbone, so that we can successfully resist the invasion. If it were you, I'm afraid. Speaking of which, Lin's tone was slow and heavy, word by word. Completely annihilated, even being reduced to a supplement will only help other dimensional beings invade the Earth. In this case, it may be better for you not to join the frontline battlefield. Hearing what Lin said, Natasha Romanoff and Phil Coulson looked at each other. The meaning behind Lin's words, they naturally understood. 377 is to make them bleed heavily in S.H.I.E.L.D. and at the same time show the corresponding combat power. Only qualified to enter the frontline battlefield in his mouth. Hearing this, Phil Coulson touched the earphones beside his ears, as if he was sending some message. Seeing this, Lin didn't care, he definitely had to discuss such matters with their chief. It's impossible for S.H.I.E.L.D. to not bleed. After a while, Phil Coulson spoke slowly as if he had received some news. Mr. Lin, our chief would like to discuss this matter with you in person. When do you think you have time? Hearing this, Lin raised an eyebrow and said with a smile. Definitely. At this time tomorrow morning, you ask Nick Fury to come to my office. Let's talk more. 35 Phil Coulson smiled and said gently after hearing what Lin said. Okay, this is okay. I'll go back and talk to the director. 35. Immediately afterwards, his tone was full of curiosity and he asked tentatively. Advertisement, Mr. Lin, may I visit the frontline battlefield, please? To be honest, I'm curious. Having said that, Natasha Romanoff, who was next to him, nodded very cooperatively, and his eyes began to discharge, as if seducing Lin. See this. Lin looked at the two people opposite and said as if pointing. It's fine to see. But I'm afraid not today. Hearing this, Natasha Romanoff and Phil Coulson understood what Lin was implying. If you can't do it today, that means you can do it tomorrow, and you have to meet your own director tomorrow. The meaning is obvious. Tomorrow, you can take the director and other personnel to visit the city he built in the frontline battlefield. Afterwards, Natasha Romanoff and Phil Coulson chatted with Lin for a few moments before bidding farewell. Lin said politely and watched them leave his office. Pondered for a moment, thinking about how to communicate with Nick Fury tomorrow, or how to make S.H.I.E.L.D. bleed. After a while, a smile formed on the corner of his mouth. Immediately, he took out a book borrowed from Kamatage and continued to read. Well, he's been reading occult books on space, especially teleportation systems, for the last time. The harvest is quite deep, and he is now confident to establish a simplified version of the teleportation system. But, to cover the entire Earth, further research is needed. This is a big project. Even after the successful construction of the City of Shining Stars, he will only open up corresponding transmission channels according to the important cities in the world, and then slowly cover other cities and other regions in the later stage. After all, the larger the coverage area, the more complex the system, and the more advanced knowledge is required. Anyway, take your time. Lin is not in a hurry. His current strength is not invincible on Earth, but he can be regarded as the top, enough to solve any problem on Earth. Acai. The next day, at 9 a.m., at the office of the chairman of Xingyao Building. At this moment, Lin, in front of the tea table in his office, began to clean the cups, pour tea, wash the tea and so on. Ever since he got to know the Ancient One magician, he has been interested in drinking tea. So half a year ago, in my office, I bought a tea table and placed some good tea. You can drink it at ordinary times, or when you have guests, you can also drink it together. He is now slowly starting to make tea, and he has received the news that Nick Fury has arrived at the Shining Star Building and is walking towards his office. Soon, there were crisp knocks on the door, Lin said lightly. Advertisement, come in. The voice fell, the assistant had opened the door, and then Nick Fury entered the office with Phil Coulson and Natasha Romanoff. Lin then waved and waved to Nick Fury and the others. The assistant stepped back, and Nick Fury walked in front of Lin with Phil Coulson and Natasha Romanoff. Looking at Lin, who was slowly brewing tea, he thought for a while. An inexplicable look flashed on his face, and he led the two of them to sit cross-legged. Lin looked at the three who sat down, smiled and said softly, "You came just right, this tea is almost ready. When the time comes, you can taste my craft." After my research on tea art during this period of time, the level has been greatly improved. After Nick Fury heard it, he seemed to be infected by the quiet atmosphere at the moment, and said softly, "Okay, wait for your tea." Also, I did it slowly, making an appreciation, watching Lin's heartwarming tea-making process. Behind him, Phil Coulson and Natasha Romanoff looked at each other and waited slowly. After a while, Lin finished brewing tea, lifted the teapot and poured half full to the three of them in turn, and then poured another half into his own teacup. After everything was over, Lien Xian raised his teacup and said gently to the three of them, "Come and taste my craft. 5. Have a taste of the tea I made. This tea is very precious, and most people can't drink it." Seeing this, Nick Fury and the other three began to pick up the teacup and began to taste it slowly. While drinking tea, he closed his eyes slightly and nodded slightly. After tasting it for a while, Nick Fury said in admiration, "Good tea, really good tea. Among the fragrant tea aromas, the tea water is as clear and refreshing, so it can be called the best." 5. After tasting it, the teeth and cheeks remained fragrant and sweet. "Good tea, really good tea." Hearing Nick Fury's admiration, a smile appeared on Lin's face. A black man who doesn't understand tea art can praise him so much. Whether it was true or not, it made him feel comfortable from the bottom of his heart. Immediately afterwards, Phil Coulson and Natasha Romanoff also began to admire. "Well, it seems that his craft has really improved." After a while, Nick Fury said directly when he saw that Lin didn't say anything about the dimensional invasion. "Lin, about Chapter 169 Shield and Xingyao who are in trouble. Lin, regarding the dimensional invasion, please also perform your duties as a consultant. Tell us about it." Hearing what Nick Fury said, he smiled and said unhurriedly, "Oh, sorry. I haven't been to S.H.I.E.L.D. for a long time, and I forgot that I still have a consultant position." Having said this, Lin pondered for a while, as if sorting out his thoughts, and then opened his mouth to introduce. "The Earth we live on is very precious in the eyes of the masters of many dimensions." 35. So, since ancient times, there have been a lot of latitudinal invasions. They have left a lot of traces on the Earth, and this has also shaped the culture of the Earth. For example, the Holy God, the fallen angel Lucifer, the devil Mephisto, etc., are some powerful dimensional masters. And now we can live safely on Earth and rarely see latitude invasion wars. The core is the existence of the Kamar-Taj Sorcerer Supreme. In the entire universe, in all the dimensions nearby, the Sorcerer Supreme is the most famous. He led the Kamar-Taj all the way against the latitude invasion. 39. And she herself has repelled and even severely injured those dimensional masters more than once, so that they dare not be too presumptuous on Earth. 9. Speaking of which, Lin's tone was full of confidence, pride, even pride. "And we, Shining Star, have a good relationship with Kamar-Taj, and Sorcerer Supreme have a good relationship with me. Therefore, in order to reduce the pressure of dimensional invasion, I led our Xingyao to join the battle against the invasion. Make a contribution to protect the Earth." Hearing Lin's words, Nick Fury's face considered for a moment, then said in a deep voice, "In that case, in order to protect the Earth, S.H.I.E.L.D. is bound by the duty. We will send troops and a large number of arms support to resist the dimensional invasion. At the same time, S.H.I.E.L.D. is willing to help the forces behind Xingyao to jointly resist the invasion." Well, hearing this from Lin, plus introducing yourself to this much detail, he still didn't understand what Lin meant. This dimensional invasion may be real, but whether it will really endanger the Earth is definitely up for discussion. He only knew one thing, and that was that Xingyao or Lin was definitely not a fool. Go to the frontline battlefield for no reason and resist the so-called dimensional invasion. Advertisement bullshit. From what he knew about Lin, a typical capitalist, he wouldn't do it if it didn't help. More importantly, a war involves two worlds and two dimensions, and the hidden benefits are undoubtedly huge amounts of. The simplest point is the corpse of the intruder, which definitely contains a large amount of substances and elements that the Earth has never seen before. Not to mention that as an extraordinary war, the extraordinary power and extraordinary system contained in it can be said to be massive. S.H.I.E.L.D. can eat a lot as long as they can catch a little. And listening to Lin's words inside and outside the meaning, did not intend to carry it alone. That's right, in a war, no one can stand it if one side forces it to carry it. Finding more cannon fodder or allies to spread the risk is the most normal choice. And the entire S.H.I.E.L.D. for the Shining Star Group, the most important thing is the official identity. Or rather, he is under the umbrella of the United Nations, has ties to all the nations of the world, and more importantly, the protection of the planet has just come under the purview of S.H.I.E.L.D. As long as Xingyao can pull S.H.I.E.L.D., then joint negotiations with other countries will have a more favorable advantage. If nothing else, when S.H.I.E.L.D. entered this car, he had to safeguard the interests of Xingyao, or the interests of S.H.I.E.L.D. Because the interests of the two begin to align. S.H.I.E.L.D. cannot and will never allow its own interests to flow out for no reason. Let's keep it simple. S.H.I.E.L.D. pays such a high price and everyone else pays nothing, let alone Lin or not. S.H.I.E.L.D. He is also counting on this to make a fortune, so Nick Fury vowed. After Lin heard what Nick Fury said, he patted his palm lightly and said in a deep voice. Well, it seems that S.H.I.E.L.D. is worthy of being a role model for maintaining the world. It seems that the two of us really want to cooperate and cooperate well. When the word cooperation was mentioned, the two looked at each other with meaningful smiles on their faces. Phil Coulson and Natasha Romanoff next to them were a little stunned when they saw it. Immediately, as if he understood something, he cursed inwardly. 0. Ask for flowers 0. It seemed that the director was going to have an affair with Lin, and immediately, the two of them started singing praises. Advertisement. The director talks to Lin about cooperation, and they also have benefits. They knew in advance of the power potions and physical fitness strengthening potions under the Xingyao group. This is enough to make them a little jealous. With their confidence, they may be able to improve their strength and even activate their abilities. After a few simple words, Nick Fury said, Lin, can you now take a look at the city your Xingyao built? If resources are needed, we S.H.I.E.L.D. can provide some for free. Hearing this, Lin shook his head directly. 0. He is not stupid. The City of Stars, they have built it alone, and they undoubtedly have the greatest advantage in mastering the right to speak. If you go to S.H.I.E.L.D., wouldn't that be an excuse for them to intervene in the City of Stars? After all, the other party contributes money, people, and material resources. As the current ally of the two, is it appropriate not to give the other party certain authority? Germinations like this must be stifled in the cradle. Besides, Xingyao is still $1 trillion capital, and there are still funds. Immediately, he said lightly to Nick Fury, we named it the City of Stars. It's more than half finished now, and it'll be finished in a month or two. Don't bother S.H.I.E.L.D. to help. But, at this point, Lin paused. He also needed to give Nick Fury a reassurance. So he said with a smile, I can take you to see the City of Stars. A look of pity flashed in Nick Fury's eyes when he heard Lin's refusal. But then, heard that Lin could take them to the City of Stars. He looked happy, although he had some confidence in Lin. But after all, hearing is false, seeing is believing. Taking a look, he felt more at ease, so he nodded and said to Lin in a deep voice. Okay, please lead the way. After Lin heard it, she nodded slightly, drew a small circle to the side, and said something silently in her heart. In an instant, a transmission channel with sparks opened 8, Chapter 170 Mountains and Seas, Nick Fury's Horror. Through the transmission channel with sparks, everyone present can clearly see that there is an underground base opposite. More importantly, a similar space transmission channel was also opened in the underground base opposite. And a large number of people shuttle back and forth, carrying materials, instruments and so on. This kept the lead Nick Fury thinking. This scene undoubtedly shows that Xingyao or Lin has mastered the mature space shuttle technology. And let him see it in person, which means another meaning. That is, S.H.I.E.L.D. may be used in a large number of space transmission channels later, and there is no possibility of hiding. That's why it's so undisguised. Even, not only the S.H.I.E.L.D. family will use it, but other forces will also use it. If so, Nick Fury's thoughts kept turning, and a look of horror flashed in his eyes. If he guessed everything correctly, Xingyao wants to use this to master the transportation hub of the entire extraordinary world, and this will surely further influence or control the entire extraordinary world of the Earth. There's no doubt about it, and the same would be true if he were S.H.I.E.L.D. At this moment, Nick Fury knew the work in a small way, and with a small solidified transmission channel, he deduced the general appearance of the performance plan. If Lin knew about it, he would definitely be amazed. As expected of the S.H.I.E.L.D. director, if he hadn't been deceived by his boss from the very beginning, maybe S.H.I.E.L.D. would have really become a weapon in his hands. Immediately, Lin stepped forward, followed by Nick Fury and the other three. After entering the underground base, Lin stretched his finger forward and briefly introduced to the three people behind him. The front is the result of my research on space, which can solidify the effect of space transmission, 99. Let everyone travel back and forth between the two spaces freely. Advertisement, let's go into the City of Stars and take a look. With that said, Lin saw that the last batch of supplies had been transported, leaving a brief gap. They took Nick Fury and the three into the teleportation channel and entered the City of Stars. Just entering the City of Stars, Nick Fury, Phil Coulson, and Natasha Romanoff were immediately shocked by the scene in front of them. Especially Natasha Romanoff opened her mouth slightly, her face showing horror. They saw that a large number of building materials were placed next to each house or building. At the same time, there are 2 or 3 builders in front of each house or building, with a similar supervisor, the presence of a designer. More importantly, they did not have any tools in their hands, but waving their hands, they controlled a large amount of building materials, floated from the air, and merged into the buildings in front of them. Almost at a speed visible to the naked eye, a house or a building grows out. Yes, the word long is used. As if by magic, a large number of materials are automatically assembled into a house, a building. Such a scene will never happen again in their eyes. It seems that there is no mortal existence in the opposite world, everyone is extraordinary, and can control a large amount of civil engineering, gold and stone to build buildings and build cities. At first glance, there are at least dozens of people in this scene. That's just a small part of the city, but other places. At least thousands, even tens of thousands. This is equivalent to what? It is equivalent to the number of personnel in the hands of the Shining Star Group that is enough to build an army of supernatural beings. And what about their shield? It is not that there are no extraordinary people, and the number is only in double digits, and it is even far away from 100 people. SHIELD director Nick Fury saw this scene. The color of thinking flashed in his eyes, and an inexplicable smile appeared on his face. He seemed to see the direction of the future development of SHIELD. Well, with his brain, if Lin's plan is what he envisioned, then SHIELD will definitely have no shortage of superhumans in the future. Advertisement. Because of the cooperation between the two important matters, many things can be further discussed. And Lin let him see this scene, which means that about power, about transcendent is within the scope of discussion. Even, this scene is what he intentionally let himself see, in order to arouse his thoughts and ambitions. Well, he admitted it. Lin did the right thing in this move. He is now starting to become active deep inside his heart, and his ambition has been thoroughly stimulated. As if he had just taken over as SHIELD director, he was full of energy and energy. Immediately, he heard Lin in front of him begin to introduce. Fury, what you see is the City of Stars, and he has been building it for more than a month. With a large number of Earth and Stone superhumans in our hands, we have basically completed 1/3 of the project. I believe that in another 2 or 3 months, the complete City of Starlight will be able to be presented in front of you. At that time, you can also take a look at what the City of Starlight carefully constructed by our Starlight Group looks like. Hearing this, Nick Fury smiled and praised. Great, really great, 55. So many extraordinary people are used as construction workers, worthy of the Xingyao Group, with deep wealth, 35. Shanhai Ji, 35, and here, we'll name it. Lin smiled, as if Nick Fury's surprised face made him feel refreshed, and said slowly. However, then, he looked up and saw a slightly transparent 0.8 above the sky, similar to the existence of a defensive cover. Seeing Nick Fury looking up in surprise. If his impression is correct, such a giant bird is called a divine beast in the East, the Phoenix. And if such an existence appeared on the Earth, I am afraid that he would have already known about it. This is not the Earth anymore, it will be the battlefield where the Earth meets other latitude worlds in the future. Above the defensive cover, I saw a group of firebirds waving their huge wings and flying behind them with long tail feathers. Chapter 171 Nick Fury who should clean up the house. Mountains and Seas. This was Lin's new name for Taro. Originally, Lin wanted to name it Xingyao to show his ownership of this secret space. But then think about it. Discovering the name City of Stars is enough to show it. Repeating it again doesn't make much sense. On the contrary, it will appear a little deliberate, and it is easy to make other extraordinary people feel jealous. After all, the entire space secret realm is named Xingyao, as if Xingyao can control the space secret realm, and everything with a large file size is small. If you enter by yourself, you will be detected, controlled, or even imprisoned. Well, that's true, but Lin doesn't want to make that impression either. Therefore, I thought of a better name to welcome the extraordinary people all over the world from another aspect. One of the most important features of Taro is that there are many kinds of rare and strange beasts. Although it basically has no strength, it just looks like it. But it is enough to show its characteristics. O2 is based on the book, Shanhai Jing, in the previous life. Lin named it Shanhai Ji. Another layer of meaning is to accommodate mountains and seas, with a broad mind, which is very suitable for accepting the entire world, and even extraordinary people from other worlds. Nick Fury didn't care when he heard Shanhai Ji's name. He didn't know much about some Chinese illusions, but he still kept the name in his heart and went back to investigate. Even if the information is investigated, it will not pay special attention. It is just a name, and it is not called Aegis World. If it really wants to be called Aegis World, that's fine. Immediately, he asked Lin curiously, with a hint of probing. Can you introduce Shanhai Ji? Listen to what you mean, the world of mountains and seas doesn't seem to be on Earth. Advertisement. Hearing this, Lin nodded slightly and introduced with a smile. Shanhai Ji, formerly called Taro, because there is a village named Taro Village living in it. However, later faced the danger of an invasion by the Eater of Souls. We, Xingyao, came to Taro to save the villagers and kill the Soul Eater. The world of mountains and seas is attached to the Earth, and in the eyes of the masters of many dimensions, it is a petal. As long as you pass through the mountains and seas, you can quickly invade the Earth. So, we, Xingyao, are going to build a city here to defend against dimensional invasions that may come in the future. 35. Hearing this, Nick Fury cursed inwardly and then filled his heart with envy. At most, he believes 10% of what Lin said, and he will also follow this way, which means righteousness, standing on the moral high ground, and will not accept any refutation. He was sure that the Aborigines, that is, the people of Taro Village, had definitely been subdued. Otherwise, don't dare to change the name directly. However, Lin's shit luck was quite good, and he was able to obtain a secret realm in space, which was equivalent to an independent kingdom. Listening to him, this means that the area is not small. It would be great if SHIELD had such a secret space. With inner envy, Nick Fury continued the Q&A. Congratulations then, Lin. In this case, do we need to apply in advance if we want to enter the mountain and sea world later? Or, how can we enter the world of mountains and seas and enter the City of Stars? Hearing Nick Fury's question, Lin pointed to the teleportation tunnel at the back, and said with a proud face, his tone full of confidence. In the future, we, Xingyao, will build a teleportation system covering the whole world. As long as a certain price is paid, any extraordinary person can reach the City of Stars or other cities through our teleportation system. Hearing this, there was a flash in Nick Fury's eyes. When I saw the solidified transmission channel before, I began to guess that Lin had such an idea. Asking now, it really is. Then, advertisement. The brain began to constantly think about the use of Xingyao to build a teleportation system. How can it help S.H.I.E.L.D.? He didn't bother to say anything about reverting to S.H.I.E.L.D. or sharing it with the world. On the one hand, saying this is useless, Xingyao will not care. On the contrary, it will only cause anger. On the other hand, Xingyao's strength has expanded tremendously. Now plus having a space secret, it is equivalent to building an independent kingdom. Even if you want to attack with a nuclear bomb, you can't find where this secret space is? Not to mention that Xingyao has a large number of superhumans, and Lin's strength is comparable to that of a nuclear bomb. He will never mention this, and even think that the military or other forces want to take a bite in the future. 380 He will persuade a little. After all, the two sides are allies. Waiting for the two sides to fight, maybe you can get unexpected benefits. What Nick Fury was thinking, Lin had no idea. However, Lin is confident that as long as someone gets on his ship, it's beautiful without paying the price. Later, he has some means to bind the interests of both parties, and even influence the other party's power. However, Lin seemed to have thought of something, patted Nick Fury who was looking around, and said lightly when he saw the questioning gaze of the other party. By the way, Fury, if the two of us really want to cooperate, I think you should clean up the house. 39. Otherwise, the current plan information of Shanhaiji and Xingyao City will be leaked. I'm not afraid. After all, without my permission, the other party will not be able to reach Shanhaiji, nor will it affect Xingyao. But, 35 Speaking of which, Lin's tone was somewhat meaningful. I'm afraid you'll mess up. Hearing this, Nick Fury was expressionless, but his heart sank. Chapter 172 The Spear Game, Captain Marvel. Questions about the internals of S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick Fury started investigating long ago. The first clue was given to him by Lin, and he also killed a lot of Hydra with this. Although there is a battle to destroy Lord Hydra Straklin, Nick Fury still finds that there is another snakehead in S.H.I.E.L.D. A typical example. It was Baron Strucker who died mysteriously during the S.H.I.E.L.D. escort process. Doesn't this make it clear that there is a problem in it? During the whole process, he tried to identify the internal Hydra forces, but found little success. Either it was an error of judgment or, that is, the opponent's strength is too large. Even the director of him can hide it abruptly. He definitely doesn't think he's made a mistake in judgment, so there's only one reason. The opponent's strength is far greater than his own, even deeper than his own control over S.H.I.E.L.D. And this person, after thinking about it, he identified 3 people. Then he tried one by one, and the result. The enemy turned out to be his old boss, Pierce. It made his scalp tingle. He was single-handedly promoted to S.H.I.E.L.D. director by his boss, if Pierce was really Hydra. Then he is also considered a Hydra descendant. This made him curse inwardly. Definitely, he doesn't like Hydra, but after his investigation, S.H.I.E.L.D. has Pierce's agents up and down. This makes him very difficult. If this situation is really opened, if nothing else, even if S.H.I.E.L.D. is not disbanded, it will be severely hit. After all, who would trust an agent organization that has been infiltrated by the enemy for most of its forces? It is better to destroy and rebuild, and it is more worry-free. Advertisement. This left him in a dilemma. B. Lin's action in the City of Stars. If it is really successful, it will contain enormous benefits. Then as long as S.H.I.E.L.D. and the City of Stars reach an alliance, the officials of various countries must consider the influence of S.H.I.E.L.D. That way, even if S.H.I.E.L.D. takes a hit because of Hydra. Nick Fury is also confident that he will use the huge amounts of benefits to negotiate and ensure that the status of S.H.I.E.L.D. will remain unchanged or even improve. Nick Fury knows the basics of these official organizations, and they are all raccoon dogs. When there is no benefit, as long as it can hit the enemy, it is the greatest benefit. But as long as there are huge interests, then everything can be discussed. Even the enemy can. S.H.I.E.L.D., the military, the CIA, and even the Shining Star Group. Nick Fury's thoughts kept spinning in his brain, but his face was expressionless, and he replied in a deep voice. Don't worry, everything is according to plan. The other party will definitely not be able to run away this time. Hearing this, Lin nodded slightly. He still trusts Nick Fury's ability. He revealed S.H.I.E.L.D.'s hidden snakehead to Nick Fury in various ways. With this information, I believe that Nick Fury, who is prepared, will not let him down. However, just in case, he still said softly. In order to make it easier for you to clean the house better, I'll send you a message for free. 5. Then, looking at Nick Fury's doubtful eyes, he said lightly. We Xingyao have a prophecy power user. He predicted that in a month or 2 there would be an invasion of New York. 99. The impact was large enough to shock the world. 35. Then, without waiting for Nick Fury to ask questions, he said it. Advertisement. We don't know the specifics. Just foretelling a picture. How you take advantage of this news is up to you. 35. Nick Fury seemed to know that Lin was not going to continue the discussion, so he was silent and his brain started to think. An invasion war that shocked the world. If you don't prepare in advance, you may be caught off guard. 1. Know it in advance, even if it's just a very simple message. Well, enough. He has experienced an alien invasion, but he knows the huge changes that an invasion event will bring. S.H.I.E.L.D. started to rise because of an alien invasion in the 1990s. Otherwise, it would have declined completely long ago, and would not retain a responsibility to protect the whole world. You must know that this responsibility is not simply mentioned, he personally participated in the war to protect the whole world. He also met a key friend who influenced his future, Captain Marvel. He can become S.H.I.E.L.D. director, there is a very important factor, because he is Captain Marvel's friend. And Captain Marvel once fought off the alien invasion alone, and has the ability to destroy the star. With the relationship between the two people, it is enough for the World Council, as well as Pierce, to choose him as his successor. This is the change brought to him by the alien invasion belt, good money, which directly affects the development of S.H.I.E.L.D., his future, and even the direction of the world. As far as he knew, every country on Earth now is crazy about the individual combat power or the extraordinary powerhouse. It's definitely related to that battle with Captain Marvel. The Eastern Magic Spear Bureau and the Western S.H.I.E.L.D. are among the best. It's just that now another Lin from Xingyao Group has been added. Therefore, this time of invasion, we must make good use of it. Although I don't know the source, but as long as I make careful preparations before, even if I won't get a lot of benefits, it won't get worse. Afterwards, he gathered his thoughts and continued to browse the entire city of stars. The city of shining stars, the future must be the core of the entire extraordinary world, S.H.I.E.L.D. cannot miss it. Chapter 173 The Prophecy of Queen Frigga. Asgard's Banquet. Asgard. Above the splendid realm of Asgard, in the majestic Golden Hall, the heroes and generals of Asgard are holding a grand banquet. The reason for holding the banquet may have been forgotten by everyone, perhaps it was to celebrate the end of a martial arts tournament, perhaps to celebrate the birthday of a certain general, or it was more likely that everyone felt that the banquet was a great thing. All in all, the ballroom at Golden Hall was buzzing with activity on a day that was not a special holiday. A constant source of fine wine and food is brought into the banquet hall by the servants of the Golden Hall. The rough and wild warriors were bragging loudly while enjoying the food. Some drunken guys took off their shirts and collided like bulls in the middle of the banquet hall, wrestling and fighting, under the coaxing of others. There are also guys who are afraid that the world will not be in chaos, shouting and cheering. Although the scene is chaotic, it is full of the passion that Asgard warriors should have. After each grand banquet, it will turn into a big fight. This is the tradition of the Asgard people. Their blood is full of martial blood, and they are always full of passion for life and war, which makes them in the world of Asgard full of vitality. Very different from usual. One is that Thor at the moment, the central figure of the whole banquet, frowned slightly, sitting in the corner drinking suffocating wine. There is a strong contrast with the lively scene next to it. This kind of person seems to know the reason why Thor is drinking, or seems to know that Thor is in a bad mood, and everyone comes to disturb him. Thor kept pouring the mead into the glass, and drank it down cup after cup, as if drinking water. A cup. 2 cups. Cheers. In the end, Thor seemed to feel uncomfortable drinking from a cup, and directly started drinking from a pot of cow. After drinking a pot of mead, boom, Thor smashed the jug to the ground, making a shattering sound. Well, generally speaking, smashing wine glasses at a banquet is a sign that people in Asgard are in a good mood. Advertisement. 18. If you look at Thor's expression and find that he is not happy, let alone that he smashed the jug, as if this is a habitual behavior. Sif, not far away, has been watching this scene. Seeing the sullen Thor, he stretched out his hand and slightly pulled his golden dress, took a pot of wine and 2 glasses, and walked forward slowly. Here, Thor. Hi. Hearing a familiar voice in his ear, Thor looked up to the left, saw Sif in a golden dress, and called roar. Then he reached out and took the jug and glass in Sif's hands. Thank you, Sif. Hearing Thor's voice of thanks, and then looking at his expression with a hint of sadness, he said with some distress. Thor, stop worrying about Loki. Well, being Thor's best friend, plus the previous destroyer war in Midgard, is also a personal participant. I understand very well why Thor, Prince of Asgard, looks sad. Because Thor's younger brother, Loki, falls under Bifrost and may also die. Although Sif has never been fond of Loki, because in her eyes, this guy, Loki, really doesn't look like a real Asgard person. He lacks the sturdy aura that an Asgard person should have, and is more feminine, like a snake. Well, although the girls of Asgard love Loki, the most famous playwright and artist in the country. But she still likes warriors like Thor. Sif looked at Thor in front of him, looked around and found that there were not too many people around, so he lowered his head slightly and let his golden hair rest on Thor's shoulders. He whispered in his ear again. Thor, I have some news for you. Advertisement. Today, the God King convened the court magician for a prophecy ceremony, led by the Queen Frigga, including my mother. The purpose is to predict the current state of Loki. According to the prophecy of the ritual. 99. Speaking of which, Sif paused slightly, looked at Thor with a hint of excitement on his face, and said something with a mysterious aria. The princes will come together and start a war like never before. After just saying one sentence, Sif's tone returned to normal and continued. This is a sentence of the prophecy. My mother told me secretly, don't let me spread the word. Now you can stop worrying, Loki shouldn't be dead and you'll meet again eventually. 35. Hearing this, Thor's face showed an excited look, and he directly poured a full glass of Sif in front of him with a jug, and then refilled himself a glass. He raised his wine glass and gestured, then drank it in one gulp. Boom. After drinking, he smashed the wine glass hard to the ground, making a crisp cracking sound. At the moment, everyone around can see that their prince state is obviously different, without the previous depression. Although I don't know why, they rushed forward, like in the past, with full power and drinking. At the moment, Thor's mood was obviously improved, and he kept taking the full glass of wine from the attendant next to him. Take a sip, constantly smashing towards the ground. Seeing this, the people around were also unwilling to lag behind, as if they fell behind after 2 sips of a glass of wine, they began to drink, constantly smashing the cups on the ground, showing their excitement. Sif next to him saw this scene with a faint smile on his face, as if feeling relieved. After the banquet, Thor, who was full of alcohol, swayed his body slightly and let the golden hull go deep. And the direction he walked was the position of the god King Odin. Chapter 174 Hydra Shield. Thanos. Shield, underground base. In a research room deep in the underground base, a bald man, dressed in a suit and glasses, looks like a clerk's agent standing on the periphery. While looking at the indigo shimmering cube not far away, he whispered to the handsome agent Ward Gartler next to him. Ward, what are the acute eyes doing now? After Ward heard it, he also whispered back. Hitwell, John is now overseeing research at another base. Hearing this, the bald agent Jappaz Hitwell was obviously excited, and then said with a sigh. It now appears that Fury's internal scrutiny is over. Otherwise, we won't be allowed to supervise a research base. When Ward next to him heard it, he nodded, and said softly with a smile. Here, I would also like to thank the people in the interrogation department. Nick Fury never imagined that the entire interrogation department, almost all of us. Hearing this, Hitwell also showed a slight smile on his face, and said with some playfulness. If it weren't for the arrangement of the adults, Nick Fury would never have been able to take the position of director. Even so, it's easy to get rid of him. Hearing this, Ward also revealed playfulness in his eyes, and then said jokingly. To be honest, I still admire Nick Fury quite a bit. Nick Fury, what's this spirit called? It's called being alone, breaking into Hydra Shield. When the Insight program is officially implemented, he can be sent to heaven. 35. Hearing this, Hitwell, who was beside him, also laughed in a low voice, and then, the two looked at each other and smiled back. As before, watch the Tesseract. As usual, for such a precious 084 item as the Cosmic Demon, they would at most glance at it, and would not even dare to move it. For fear of causing Nick Fury's suspicion. Based on what they know about Nick Fury, as long as they are suspicious together, they will never let go unless they investigate it thoroughly. If it weren't for SHIELD's entire interrogation, including the intelligence department, most of them were their people, I'm afraid it wouldn't be so easy to get rid of suspicion. Even so, many of the researchers at this base are not their own people, and at most they conduct certain research observations here, and it is almost impossible to move the Tesseract. However, this is enough. Advertisement. What they want to study, there is no need to engage in any messy conspiracy. Write an application directly and give it to the leader above. Who calls them Hydra? Simply communicate privately, stamp a seal, and do whatever they want. Tisk tisk, Hydra Shield. This is not a simple thing to say. In the depths of the universe, an unknown purple planet. Somewhere on the planet, a black, incomparably huge, alien star warship sits high in the sky. At the moment, Thanos was sitting in the command room on top of that battleship. This cabin, which was supposed to be full of all kinds of high-tech equipment, has been transformed, and now it is full of silence and solemnity set off by black paint. And at the end of the black halo cabin is a stone throne. It looked like it was made of obsidian, it wasn't very luxurious, but it was huge and fit the size of Thanos very well. Thanos is a personal creature. But he looks very different from the Earthlings. He sits on his throne, wearing gold and blue interwoven battle armor, and wearing metal boots of the same color on his feet. He also wears a gold-blue battle helmet inlaid with gems. He looked like a giant. Standing at least 2.5 meters tall, the body is strong, but the exposed skin is purple and covered with folds. Especially on the chin, the folds are a bit scary. However, his blue eyes like animal pupils are very calm. Thanos sat on his throne, sitting there with the attitude of a thinker. He just looked straight ahead, his eyes were indifferent, and he looked down at Loki with a tall golden helmet like antlers. At the moment Loki, the heart scepter in his hand, was very proud and said loudly. Respected Lord of the Dark Order, Thanos. I, Loki, Odin Sen, the son of Odin, the future Lord of the Nine Realms, will definitely keep my promise. You give me an army, help me become king, and I will bring the space gem to you. Hearing this, Thanos nodded and remained silent, as if he was a little disdainful, and didn't even bother to say a word. Seeing the seriousness of the scene below, Nokia flashed a hint of gloom, but then smiled. Zero. Ask for flowers, Zero. He also needs Thanos' Kurita fleet now. I can't turn my back now until he takes Midgard and becomes king of Midgard. Then you can turn your face with Thanos. Advertisement. HMPH, such a disregarding attitude is not because I am down and out, making me the Lord of the Nine Realms, and the first one to destroy is Thanos' dark sect. Especially that Ebony Maw. Damn guy, he dares to mock me, and he must be tortured severely when that time comes. Thoughts pass through the brain and are put into the depths of the heart. Afterwards, he bowed respectfully to Thanos and walked out of the main hall. Shield, Item 084 Tesseract Research Underground Base. 0. At this moment, Ward and Heatwell were chatting while watching the Tesseract not far away curiously. At the moment, sudden, a researcher shouted in a somewhat urgent tone. Attention please. A large number of abnormal energy fluctuations from Tesseract. Cannot close properly. Hearing what the researcher said, Ward and Heatwell began to trot forward, shouting at the researcher to ask. What happened? Hearing the questions of the two bosses, the researcher quickly replied. Tesseract has an exception. Cannot shut down properly, and the energy fluctuates more and more. As if. At the same time, Loki wearing a golden horned helmet, holding a psychic scepter, took 8 steps. Then, as if feeling the doubt in the eyes of the two, the researcher explained. We found that it's like a place where channels are connected, and it has a lot of energy, so we can get an infinite amount of energy. 5. And now, it seems that someone is opening the passage to the other side, trying to get here through the passage. Tesseract, the reason we think it has infinite energy. It seems like someone else is starting Tesseract as well. Speaking of this, the researcher's tone was obviously a little paused and continued. As soon as the voice fell, everyone saw that Tesseract suddenly emitted more intense energy fluctuations, and then instantly became a blue light curtain. Chapter 175 Loki controls Hydra. The people of Midgard, your future king, have returned. The surrounding researchers looked at Loki, who wore a helmet like antlers and held up his spiritual scepter, and took a few steps back in fear when he heard the words shouted from Loki's mouth. Not far away, Ward and Heatwell looked at each other with a flash of surprise. Midgard, according to previous Hydra intelligence. If I'm not mistaken, this should be the name of the Asgard people, Roar. So, this time the intruder is likely to be someone from Asgard. BP. Heatwell fired immediately, and Ward himself quietly circled behind Loki, holding a dagger, as if to attack. Bang, bang, bang. As the first shot of 383 in Heatwell began, the surrounding Hydra agents seemed to be pressing the activation button and began to shoot quickly with guns. A large number of bullets were fired in Loki's direction. But, the bullet passed through Loki's body like air, splashing green waves. But there was not a trace of blood on the other side, nor a trace of pain on the other side's face. At the same time, Ward, who had slowly circled behind Loki, saw this scene. Suddenly, he stopped in surprise, and then looked around with great vigilance. Where does he still not know? The so-called Loki in front of him is definitely an illusion. Where is his body now? Suddenly, he suddenly felt as if there was a hard object approaching in his chest. He felt horrified, and was about to retreat to avoid the sudden attack. But just when the thought came up, I suddenly felt that my chest was being held back. Immediately afterwards, I felt a flash of green light in front of my eyes, and my thinking began to quickly fall into chaos. Who I am. My name is Ward Gartler, SHIELD agent, under the direction of SHIELD director Nick Fury. Do not. I am the son of Hydra agent Acute Eyes John Gartler, under the command of Director Pierce. Do not. Advertisement. I take orders from my father, John Gatler. Not right either. Who do I obey? Who is my master? The thinking in the brain, accompanied by golden energy fluctuation, began to become extremely active, and then changed automatically, as if the cognition was distorted. Almost a few seconds later, Ward's eyes were suddenly shrouded in black mist. The chaotic thinking and cognition in the brain came to an abrupt end. I got it. My master is Loki. Be the future owner of Midgard. My mission. Just to help him become king of Midgard. In an instant, Ward clearly saw Loki in golden armor standing in front of him, lowered his head and stroked his right shoulder, expressing submission. After Loki saw it, he nodded in satisfaction, patted Ward on the shoulder, and turned to look at the illusion he cast. Seeing the people who were still shooting, their brows were slightly wrinkled, and they seemed a little dissatisfied. So he held the scepter and tapped the ground slightly. In an instant, accompanied by a crisp sound, a light golden wave swept across the crowd. The people who were shooting nearby were instantly impacted by the energy and fell back to the ground. The firearm in his hand seemed to be controlled by an invisible force and was thrown into the distance. Seeing this, a smile appeared on Loki's face. Immediately afterwards, seeing this scene in the distance, Heatwell and the researchers immediately retreated to the rear. Seeing this, Loki's eyes were full of disdain, and he set his eyes on the Tesseract or space gem opposite. But Ward next to him saw this scene and said immediately, Master, you can't let these people escape from the base. Especially at the front, Heatwell, who has a lot of Hydra information. Be sure to control him. Otherwise it will definitely affect your great cause. Seeing this, Loki raised his eyebrows and said nothing, holding the spiritual scepter in his right hand, pointing at the fleeing crowd. Thoughts flickered, and in an instant, they encountered light golden energy fluctuations, which quickly radiated forward. Advertisement. The people who fled just now fell to the ground in an instant, as if they had fallen into a deep sleep. And Heatwell just seemed to hear what Lord said, and a hint of disbelief flashed in his eyes, as if he couldn't believe Ward's betrayal. Then the left hand lightly pressed a button in the middle of the line, sending a message. Immediately after, he was influenced by the spiritual scepter and fell to the ground, sleeping like a sleeper. Seeing this scene, Loki didn't take it seriously, and then continued to look at the space gem in front of him with admiration, with a hint of greed in his eyes. At the same time, red lights began to sound in many places throughout the base, and a large number of sirens sounded. Warning, warning, 35. The base was invaded, the base was invaded. It will self-destruct in 3 minutes. Countdown to 180 seconds. 179. When Ward heard this, his face changed greatly, and he said quickly, Master, we have to choose to retreat. After the base's self-destruction program was activated, all people and things were either destroyed in ashes or buried under the rubble. Then, as if thinking of something, he pointed to the 3 people not far away and said quickly, Also, Master, to have them join us will be of great help to the unification of the Earth in the future. One of the 3 Ward was referring to was Heatwell, and the other 2 were top researchers at the 2 bases. After Loki heard it, he narrowed his eyes, thought for a moment, and heard the countdown of the base's self-destruction coming from his ear. Pick up the chest next to it and include the space 0.8 gems in it. Seeing the 4 people standing behind him, a faint smile floated on Loki's face. As far away as the SHIELD director's office in New York. It is precisely Loki who controls the whole process of Hydra. Subsequently, activate the space gem in the loading suitcase with the psychic scepter. As a blue light appeared, the group instantly disappeared into the base. Nick Fury was frowning, watching the surveillance video on the computer. And the video content. Immediately afterwards, they walked to the side of the 3 of them one after another, and used their spiritual scepter to hold each other's chest. In less than half a minute, the 3 of them were affected by Mind Gem and surrendered to Loki. Chapter 176. The first appearance of Avengers. Los Angeles, Shining Star Building, Chairman's office. Ring ring ring. As soon as the phone rang, Lynn, who was reading a book, asked indifferently. What's up, Mr. Lynn? SHIELD Director Nick Fury is calling, would you please transfer? Lynn raised her eyebrows when she heard Vera's reply, and said softly. Transfer. Then, he picked up the phone next to him and asked directly. Director Nick Fury, what's going on? A serious voice came from the phone immediately. Lynn, I'm afraid the things you mentioned earlier have come up. It's just 99. Speaking of this, Nick Fury's voice with a wry smile came. As you predicted, the source came from SHIELD. And the root, precisely, is Tesseract. Hearing this, Lynn nodded slightly and said lightly. As I said, this matter, SHIELD, frequently appears in the prophecy. It definitely has a direct relationship with you. Immediately afterwards, his tone changed to O2, and he asked curiously. Okay, what do I need to do now? How did the previous plan go? Is it going well? Hearing this, Nick Fury replied affirmatively. Everything went well with the plan. Lending this opportunity will definitely allow them to clean up. Now, I need you to come over. I've called Tony, Steve, and they're here. 99. At that time, we will discuss this invasion again. Hearing this, Lynn thought for a while, and replied in a strange tone. Okay, no problem. When everyone is here, call me again. I will definitely impress them. Nick Fury, as if to hear the change in Lynn's tone, was silent for a moment and said with a slight warning. The City of Stars needs this event to be officially unveiled, and we at SHIELD also want to take advantage of this opportunity to clean up the interior. Hope our cooperation goes well. Advertisement. Hearing this, Lynn smiled and said slowly. Don't worry, everything will be fine. Nick Fury felt a little uneasy after hearing this, and finally said a few more words, and then hung up directly. SHIELD Aviation. Carrier Command Room. Tony Stark entered the command room with a suitcase, looked at Steve, Natasha Romanoff, Bruce Banner and others inside, whistled lightly, and asked directly to the lead Nick Fury. Fury, what happened? Squeeze so many of us over here. Are they all members of your team? Then, without waiting for Nick Fury to answer, he spoke directly to Steve next to him. Hi Captain, Lynn told me about you. Welcome to the 21st century. If you don't understand anything, you can ask me directly. I am more than willing to give you answers. 55. After Steve heard it, he smiled and nodded without saying much. Immediately afterwards, Tony looked at the Hulk. Bruce Banner, not far away, walked in front of him, stretched out his hand and shook it, and said in praise. It's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Banner. I heard about your deeds before years. Your study of antielectron collisions is truly unparalleled. 5. Immediately afterwards, he got closer and said jokingly. But I think it's even better if you lose control and turn into a violent Hulk. Then, Seeing Bruce Banner's speechless expression, he continued. I know a friend who is very good at keeping his emotions in check. 5. One day I will have the opportunity to introduce it to you. When Bruce heard it, his eyes lit up and he quickly replied. Thank you very much. At the moment, Nick Fury suddenly stepped out and spoke to Tony in a low voice. Drive Banner is here just to track the Rubik's Cube. Hope you can cooperate well. Hearing Nick Fury's low voice, he asked back. Nick Fury, you have to explain to me the source of this matter. Steve, Banner and the others next to him also nodded when they heard Tony's question. Seeing this, Nick Fury explained directly. The day before yesterday, an alien invader entered the SHIELD underground base and stole the Tesseract. 35. And controlled the SHIELD agent, claiming to rule the Earth. Having said that, Nick Fury patted his palm lightly, and a projection appeared in the air. Advertisement. The picture in the projection is the picture of Loki controlling Ward, Heatwell and others. Especially when Loki takes control of the Tesseract, claiming to rule Midgard, Nick Fury pauses the picture and continues. The Midgard he speaks of is the Earth we speak of. Hearing this, Bruce Banner next to him asked with some doubts. Director Nick Fury, I've been familiar with the myths of various countries before, and Midgard seems to belong to Asgard's mythology. 5. Hearing this, Nick Fury nodded to Bruce Banner and said in a deep voice. Yes, it belongs to the Asgard's roar. According to our information investigation, Asgard is real, and some time ago, there was a war on Earth. Through the efforts of SHIELD, the war was finally controlled within a certain range, and it was completely over. So, if I'm not mistaken, this alien invader is an Asgard. That is the lie in the mythology of Asgard, Loki, the god of deceit. He wants to be the king of Midgard, the king of the Earth. Attention, the other party is extremely dangerous. Having said that, Nick Fury pointed to the scepter in Loki's hand and said lightly. You must pay attention, the scepter in his hand has the function of controlling people. Never let him touch your body, 383 or you will be controlled like those SHIELD agents. 35. Hearing Nick Fury's introduction, Steve next to him suddenly asked. Fury, how's it going? Phil Coulson next to him replied directly. We scanned all the cameras, cell phones, laptops, and satellites that could read wirelessly in the world, as long as they were connected to our eyes. However, time is still too late. Saying that, he set his eyes on Bruce Banner. So, we brought in Dr. Banner, who has deep research on gamma rays. It will be great for finding Tesseract. After listening to Bruce Banner next to him, he thought for a while and asked Nick Fury directly. How many spectrometers can you call? 95. As much as you want. Hearing what Nick Fury said, Bruce nodded and said in a deep voice. Okay, then contact all the labs you can find. Have them put the spectrometer on the roof and calibrate it to search for gamma rays. 99. I'll give a tracking algorithm that can rule out at least a few areas. Hearing what Bruce Banner said, Nick Fury lit the computer with great satisfaction, and just wanted to say it directly. Sudden, a portal with sparks appeared next to it, and a young man stepped out with a woman directly. Chapter 177 Fight for the Dominance of the Avengers. Prophecy. Hello, everyone. Lynn took Lena out of the space portal and said hello directly to Tony, Steve and others. Bruce Banner looked at the slowly disappearing spark portal with amazed eyes, and asked curiously. Is this Mr. Lynn? Excuse me, did you just cast magic? Lynn heard Bruce's question, looked around for a week, and found that he seemed to be the only one who had never seen him. He cast the portal by himself, so he explained with a smile. Banner, I know you, when you are also the Hulk, you are very powerful. 55. The portal that I just cast is a method borrowed from the magician, which can also be called magic. At the moment, Tony next to him looked at Lynn and called Roar directly. Lynn, here you are. By the way, I was going to introduce you to Dr. Banner just now. 35. I remember you had a trick before, which can quickly calm people down and get them out of their emotional out of control state, just what Dr. Banner needs. 5. You can take a look when you are free. After Lynn heard it, he gave Tony a big thumb in his heart, good assist, and said to Tony with a smile. Okay, no problem, this is what I should do. 99. After all, this war needs everyone to resist together. Immediately afterwards, he turned his head slightly, looked at Bruce Banner, and said softly. Drive Banner, you can come with me after everyone's chatting, and I'll see how to get you out of your emotional out of control state quickly. Just in time, I researched magic about emotions a while ago. Maybe I can help you. Nick Fury's face suddenly darkened when he heard Lynn's words. The three top forces of the Avengers, Tony and Steve, have all received Lynn's kindness. If only Bruce Banner would accept Lynn's help. I'm afraid, the Avengers he built could easily change hands. So, he coughed lightly and said to Lynn in a deep voice. Drive Banner, let me introduce you. This Mr. Lynn is our advisor to SHIELD. He will also participate in this operation. Then, directly asked Lynn. Lynn, the lady next to you, would you like to introduce me? Well, I didn't want to change the subject, I was just curious about the lady next to me. According to the information he collected, the identity of this young lady is unknown, without any information, and she is well protected by Xingyao. Advertisement. This time, I can just take this opportunity to get some relevant information. After Lin heard Nick Fury's question, he introduced with a smile. Fury, this lady, everyone can call her Lady Lena. It's the prophet of our star. Our Lady Lena predicted this war. Although I don't know the reason, I also know that this is a war that can affect the whole world and bring disaster to New York City at the same time. To this end, we, Xingyao, have already made preparations. Then, with a serious tone, he asked Fury. Fury, how is the situation now? This scene, Tony laughed secretly when he saw it. This is an inappropriate fight for the right to speak. It seems that Nick Fury is really going to be a muggle this time. Well, based on what he knows about Lin, this time, even if he can't gain control of the battle, he has to gain enough initiative. However, this time, it is obvious that among the bases of S.H.I.E.L.D., the home court is on Nick Fury's side, but I don't know how Lin operates. Then, he looked at Nick Fury's sinking expression with interest. Steve next to him felt a little uncomfortable, but Lin helped Peggy regain his youth before, so he didn't say much. Nick Fury lowered his face, thought for a moment, and then said in a deep voice. Lin, right now we're searching for traces of the Tesseract. Take this, lock Loki's position. This time, we need Dr. Banner's research on gamma rays. Drive Banner just offered a plan. 35. Preparing to search. Hearing this, Lin nodded and said softly to Dr. Banner. Drive Banner, this time it's up to you. According to Reina's prediction, the scale of this war will be exceptionally grand. I'm afraid there will be an alien army invasion of Earth. So, please. After Bruce Banner heard it, his expression became serious, as if he knew that his task was arduous, but he asked curiously. I just heard you prophesy, Mr. Lin. 35. Can this Lady Lena really predict the future? When Lin heard it, he explained with a smile. Yes, Bruce, may I call you Roar? Advertisement. Seeing Bruce Banner nodded slightly, then continued. Bruce, Ms. Lena has the ability of prophecy. But it is not a complete prediction of the future. 35. You can only see fragmentary fragments of the future to speculate on what will happen in the future. Immediately afterwards, his tone changed, and he continued to speak with some seriousness. In this invasion war, Ms. Reina predicted some fragments of the future. I was in discussions with director Nick Fury before. I hope to be able to prepare in advance and try not to let the war happen. Pity. Speaking of this, Lin's tone was full of helplessness and regret. This time, I never expected that the source was Tesseract. And it turned out to be the invasion of Asgard's god of deceit, Loki. If this information can be obtained in advance, I am afraid that this war will not occur. Hearing the regret in Lin's tone, Bruce Banner directly comforted him. No one would have fully anticipated this. It's pretty good that we can have the ability of prophecy. Then, some curious asked. Then about Loki's trail, can it be obtained through the ability of prophecy? 5. Hearing Bruce Banner's somewhat curious tone, Lin explained. Because Miss Reina's prophecy is passive, not active. So, there is no information, good money, good on Loki's trace as of yet. Well, even if you really know, you can't do it now. The war has not yet started, so how will his plans, including those of S.H.I.E.L.D., be implemented? Hearing Lin's reply, Bruce Banner's mood was a little low, but he returned to normal. Lin at the moment, lightly holding Reina next to her, began to explain. Afterwards, I called Roar with Lin, walked to the computer next to him, and started to input the algorithm to eat. At least the range can be shortened a little bit. Now, Reina is receiving another slice of the future. After a while, Bruce Banner took out a USB flash drive, handed it to Nick Fury, and said softly. At the moment, Lena next to Lin suddenly turned white, and a hoarse voice came out of her mouth, but no one could hear what was said. This is the algorithm I just mentioned, and now it's time to get started. Immediately afterwards, accompanied by a strange fluctuation, everyone felt a sense of horror. Chapter 178 Nick Fury being questioned by everyone. Everyone looked at Lena, whose eyes were white and kept making a hoarse voice, and there was a hint of surprise in their eyes. However, when I heard Lin's explanation, I had to look forward to it again in an instant. Tony, who was next to him, saw this scene and seemed to think of something, then turned his head to glance at Nick Fury, and laughed secretly. At this moment, Nick Fury felt uneasy in his heart, as if he had thought of something, and his face suddenly turned black. After a while, Lena returned to normal, and Lin next to her asked gently. Reina, what clip of the future did you see just now? Tell everyone. Reina glanced at Lin next to her and said softly. Sir, do I need to show what I just saw? Hearing Lena's question, and glanced at everyone's expectant eyes, Lin nodded. So Lena Qingwu's hands made strange waves in the surrounding space. Immediately afterwards, the surrounding environment loomed and began to change. Lin next to him explained slowly. This is an ability of Lena, which can surface fragments of memory through projection. Don't worry, it's just a projection, it doesn't have any attack power. Through the projection, everyone can clearly see the content of Reina's prophecy. 99. After explaining, Lin also began to observe the surrounding projected environment in detail, as if full of anticipation. 383. Soon, the surrounding environment began to change. Nick Fury saw everyone quarreling in this command room. Although he couldn't hear the sound, he could see the angry faces of everyone. However, to Nick Fury's surprise, he saw Thor here. Immediately afterwards, he set his eyes on the shining soul scepter not far away. He can clearly feel that all this stems from this scepter, and this scepter, through the previous surveillance video, can be seen that Loki is holding it. Then, the screen turned. Everyone saw that the aircraft carrier was engulfed by a large amount of flames, and the aircraft carrier was afraid of being attacked by bombs or the like. Then, the picture changed again. Bruce Banner transformed into a Hulk, his eyes glowing blood red. As if stimulated, he frantically attacked Black Widow Natasha Romanoff, and attacked various environments around him at the same time, causing a lot of damage. The people next to him saw this scene and turned their attention to Bruce. Advertisement. Then, almost a few seconds later, the screen turned. Coming to a hallway, everyone saw Loki directly stab Phil Coulson to death through the psychic scepter. Phil Coulson next to him saw this scene, his body shivered instantly. Staring at this scene, his face changed, and he didn't know what to think in his mind. Soon, everyone saw it again. The entire aircraft carrier began to fall downward, as if it had been hit hard. At the moment, the picture came to an abrupt end. The projection disappeared, and everyone found that they had returned to the original command room. Tony saw the entire prophecy just now, especially when he saw the death of a large number of agents. His face instantly became serious, glanced at it, and everyone said directly. Everyone has seen the picture of the prophecy. Let's talk about your feelings. I'll start with my own personal thoughts. 35. Speaking of which, Tony paused for a moment and said calmly. Everyone just saw it with their own eyes. 35. Loki is afraid that he will personally lead people into the current aircraft carrier, and at the same time, control the Hulk. Heavy damage to the aircraft carrier. Having said that, Tony set his sights on Nick Fury and continued. I think, Nick Fury, you should be on your guard. 99. I'm going to let these people's sneak attack succeed. At the same time, Tony glanced at Bruce Banner and said softly to Lin not far away. Lin, it's up to you to deal with Bruce's emotional outburst. You can't let him be controlled so easily. Otherwise, we would definitely be hit hard. Hearing this, Lin nodded and said in a deep voice to Bruce Banner beside him. Bruce, come with me later. 35. I want to find a way to keep you calm and at the same time add a layer of psychic protection to minimize your risk of being controlled by others. 5. After Steve next to him heard it, he also began to speak. I just saw all of us arguing. Advertisement. I feel that such a phenomenon is obviously wrong. In such a time period, it is impossible for us to disregard the overall situation and quarrel. 35. There must be something going on in it. I saw it. There was a scepter on the table just now, emitting a faint light. Besides that, I have a weapon next to me personally. 35. I've seen similar weapons here, the ones produced by HYDRA's research on Tesseract during World War II. 35. The reason I got into an argument was probably due to the influence of both. Having said that, Steve said to Nick Fury next to him. What is S.H.I.E.L.D. hiding? What is that weapon? I can't quarrel with you for no reason. Tony next to him heard it, nodded and said lightly. Yes, I also saw a blueprint appearing on my computer just now. It's obviously about the forging of weapons. The label below is clearly S.H.I.E.L.D. This, I think our director Nick Fury should explain. 99. Having said that, Bruce Banner next to him interjected and asked with some doubts. Sorry, I have a little doubt, who is the blonde man with the hammer that I saw earlier? Can you tell me about it? After Nick Fury heard it, he glanced at Lin with a serious expression and the questioning eyes of everyone, thought for a moment, and said in a deep voice. Everything always starts with Thor. Speaking of which, Fury said to Bruce Banner. This allows us not only to know the existence of other life in the universe, but also to discover our weakness. Can't you control Tesseract the same way? Then, continue to explain to everyone. Hearing this, Steve next to him asked calmly. That's the blonde man you just saw with the hammer, he's the god of Asgard, Thor. The universe is full of creatures more powerful than us, and no one can control them. Last year, he came to Earth and started a big war that leveled a small town. Even if we fired multiple nuclear bombs, we still haven't completely solved the enemy. Chapter 179 The Catastrophe of Hydra. The Avengers enter the City of Stars. Faced with Steve's questioning, Nick Fury replied directly. We are here to protect the whole world. The responsibility of S.H.I.E.L.D. is to prevent all possible future threats. We cannot give up our responsibility to protect the world because of some possible problems. Hearing Nick Fury's reply, a hint of disappointment appeared on Steve's face, and Tony next to him began to sneer. It seems that if we become a threat, we should also be prevented. After Nick Fury heard it, he frowned and was about to speak when Bruce next to him interrupted everyone's questioning. Okay, shouldn't it be time to think about how to solve the attack on the aircraft carrier? It doesn't make sense to discuss these things that have happened. After Lin next to him heard it, he said in agreement. Yes, things have already happened, and there is really no point in arguing anymore. Although I condemn Nick Fury's behavior, if it were me, I would have taken some risky measures to ensure safety. It is impossible for us to refrain from taking any action because there is a risk. It's like we don't give up eating for fear of choking. The bottom line. 35. Lin glanced at Nick Fury's sullen face and continued. Still weak. If S.H.I.E.L.D. were strong enough, none of these things would happen. The so-called risk is nothing but the imbalance between strength and danger. If Loki appeared in front of me, I would have killed him long ago, talking about controlling others and escaping from the base. Then, asked Nick Fury. Fury, you have seen the prophecy screen just now. Can you see how the other party attacked? There is no way to prevent it. Nick Fury heard Lin's question and fell silent, as if thinking about something. The picture just now and the questioning from everyone suddenly put S.H.I.E.L.D. and Nick Fury into a disadvantageous situation. Advertisement. He is now certain that this prophecy picture is definitely Lin's means, and there should be no problem with the prediction, because the development of things is very logical. It's just that there are some fragments, it is impossible to deduce the whole thing, and maybe some important details have been hidden. No wonder Lin said before that he wanted to impress. He is now more impressed by Lin Duncan than anyone else. If he hadn't cooperated with him later, he would have been kicked out of the aircraft carrier long ago. He now regrets inviting Lin. Does this make it clear that they want to take over the entire Avengers? However, that's all it can do now. For the benefit of the city of shining stars behind, I have to endure it now. After thinking for a moment, Nick Fury said in a deep voice. Because of the limited content of the prophecy, the source of the attack could not be inferred, and the only thing we can say is to strengthen our vigilance. Saying that, Nick Fury set his eyes on Lin, as if he knew what Lin was going to say. Sure enough, Lin first glanced at everyone, and then said slowly. According to Fury, the aircraft carrier is not safe right now. I suggest that Loki their target is the Avengers. 5. We need to move to a more secluded, safe place so it's harder to have an attack. 99. Hearing this, Steve, Tony and others nodded in agreement. Nick Fury didn't nod, but didn't object, as if to admit it. Seeing everyone nodding, Lin said with a smile. It just so happened that some time ago, we needed to build our own headquarters. The location is very secret, ordinary people can't enter at all, it is very safe, this time everyone can go to our Xingyao to discuss this matter. Do you see no problem? Hearing what Lin said, everyone looked at each other, and combined with what happened just now, they seemed to think of something, but they didn't say it. Tony on the side said jokingly. Let me just say, some time ago, it was discovered that Xingyao was buying building materials on a large scale, but JARVIS has not been able to detect any traces. It turns out that this time, I must take the opportunity to take a good look at Xingyao's headquarters. Hearing what Tony said, Steve and Bruce next to him were also quite curious. Advertisement. Phil Coulson on the side, Black Widow Natasha Romanoff, showed his true color. It seemed that Lin really wanted to take this opportunity to fully reveal the City of Stars. However, with a look of curiosity, they had entered the mountain and sea world before, and they had also seen the City of Stars under construction. 0. Ask for flowers. 0. Although Nick Fury on the side did not nod, he also tacitly agreed that in this situation, if he wants to cooperate with Xingyao later, he has to accept it. Lin looked at Tony, Steve and the others agreed, waved his hand gently, and instantly, a huge portal with sparks appeared in front of everyone. Everyone can clearly see the opposite of the portal, there is a huge amount of city gate, some are lonely, and there are occasional shadows flickering. Seeing this, Lin stretched out his hand to indicate that everyone can enter first. After everyone entered, Lin glanced deeply at the camera not far away. Immediately, he stepped into the portal and disappeared suddenly. At this moment, the camera image has been broadcast to Pierce's computer. Especially Lin's last look before leaving made Pierce feel a little uneasy, as if his every move was being watched. Immediately, after thinking for a moment, he shook his head in distress. The current situation, for his line of Hydra, is simply terrible. The content of the message is precisely part of the conversation of Lin et al. It will definitely be used by Loki. At that time, he can say that the game is really over. Coupled with the Insight plan, once Loki is in control, it's really troublesome. Although Pierce noticed it and immediately notified everyone to hide, but basically most of the power was controlled by Loki. The most troublesome thing is that he has now received the news that some Hydra personnel are re-exploring the information about the Insight project and the Zola algorithm. No matter how stupid he is, he can know that once the Insight plan he has been running for many years is not handled properly, it will not be exposed. With that in mind, Pierce thought for a moment, then ordered the Hydra agent next to him to send a message to Loki's people. Since that evil god Loki has controlled both Ward and Hillwetter, he has directly controlled Acute Eyes John through Ward, and has controlled a large number of Hydra agents through the Hydra list that Hillwetter holds. He is quite aware of the role of Zola's algorithm. If he really wants to use it to find Hydra, none of them can escape, including himself. Chapter 180 The Avengers Shock. Loki's counterattack. Mexico, Hydra underground base. Loki looked at the computer video in front of him and said lightly to Hillwett next to him. What do you think this mortal man named Pierce means? 99. Hillwit next to him said very respectfully. Master, Pierce has a very simple idea, he just doesn't want us to fall directly into Nick Fury's trap. The main thing is to get us into infighting with Nick Fury and Pierce take the lead. Speaking of which, Hillwit sneered. It seems that Pierce has no choice now, otherwise he would not have resorted to such a blunt means. Hearing this, Loki nodded slightly and said coldly. Right now, do my best to search for this mortal man named Pierce, whose Zola algorithm is very important. 39. 383 mentioned Zola's algorithm, and Loki's eyes clearly showed a greedy look. Hearing Hillwit introduce Zola's algorithm before, Loki knew that this thing would be the key to becoming king of the earth. Through the Zola algorithm, the traces of all the enemies can be calculated, and then the enemies can be completely eliminated, which is simply the only magic weapon to rule the earth. It's a pity that I rushed to the secret base where Zola's artificial intelligence was stored, and found a lot of traces of retreat, so I had to return in disappointment. Even so, Loki is also quite interested in this Hydra's insight plan. He found that this Hydra is simply a treasure, and if you dig it well, it can really rule the entire Midgard. With this in mind, Loki is very satisfied to look at the psychic scepter he holds in his right hand. If there is no efficient control function of the psychic scepter, I am afraid that Hydra cannot be used for him. But, Loki stroked his forehead at the thought of the prophetic images the Avengers had seen, especially the arrival of his brother Thor. This is a trouble. If his older brother comes to Earth, with his strength, he will probably cause him a lot of trouble. Then Loki seemed to think of something, and told Ward next to him. Ward, go check the Jane Foster trail and get her back for me. 99. Then, as if thinking of something again, Loki added. I want to live, it's best to keep her safe. 99. After Ward next to him heard it, he said in a deep voice. Advertisement. Okay, Master, you must complete the task you ordered. Hearing what Ward said, Loki nodded slightly and waved his hand. Ward saw this and walked outside the base. As everyone stepped into the portal opened by Lin, he couldn't help but looked up at the huge city gate and opened his mouth slightly to show his surprise. They could clearly see 4 large characters carved above the huge city gate. City of Stars. Immediately, everyone turned their attention to Lin, as if waiting for his introduction. Seeing this, Lin smiled and said introductively. You see this city, it was recently built by our Xingyao independently. He will be the headquarters of our entire Xingyao in the future, and at the same time, it will also be the core of the supernatural world of the future Earth. 5. Speaking of which, Lin subconsciously raised his voice a notch. This city, the future guests, will be extraordinary people with extraordinary power. He is located in the world of mountains and seas, which is a secret space that ordinary people can't reach at all. The only way to enter the Shanhaiji, the city of Starlight, is through the teleportation system constructed by us. Hearing this, Steve next to him was a little surprised and asked with some doubts. Lin, according to you, are we still on Earth? Hearing this, Lin explained with a smile. Steve, don't worry, we're still on Earth. The so-called secret space is actually attached to the Earth and cannot exist without the Earth. Tony next to him also asked with some doubts. I heard from you just now that the only way to enter the city of Starlight is through the teleportation system. You mean, it's similar to the portal you opened just now? Can this be activated at any time? Lin nodded and said. Advertisement. Yes, Tony, you can understand that. After we have completed the construction of the entire teleportation system, you can quickly enter the mountain and sea world and enter the city of stars at various teleportation points for a certain fee. Even you can go directly to other parts of the Earth, as long as there is a teleportation point there. Hearing Lin's introduction, everyone was obviously a little excited, as if they were imagining certain scenes. However, Nick Fury next to him interrupted everyone's fantasy and said in a deep voice. Okay, let's go first, now the most important thing is how to resist Loki's invasion. 9. As he spoke to Lin in a serious tone, as if he meant something. Lin, this is your territory, now you lead the way. The overall situation is the most important, and when Loki is driven out of the Earth, we will seriously appreciate your city of stars. Hearing this, Lin nodded and said softly to the crowd. Okay, everyone, come with me. When the words fell, Lin took the lead and led the crowd towards the interior of the city of stars. At the same time, he would slow down on the road and introduce to everyone. This is the future residential area, and our employees of Shining Star or anyone who wants to live in the city of Shining Star can buy it. This is the commercial area, and the later transactions about extraordinary weapons or extraordinary potions will eventually be traded here. This is a battle arena. If there is a dispute, it can be resolved through battle in the arena. With Lin's introduction, everyone had a deeper understanding of the city. Soon, walking to a Villa 0.8 in the central area of the city, Lin introduced it softly. This is where I live, everyone can go in, and the equipment is very complete, enough for us to discuss. As he spoke, he clapped his hands lightly, and in an instant, all the doors opened. Lin walked towards the hall of the villa with the Avengers, and at the same time, informed Vera to prepare some simple fruits and drinks for later drinking. Soon, everyone sat down around the huge amounts of round table in the middle of the living room. Seeing a fruit plate placed on each seat on the round table, everyone tasted it with great satisfaction. After a few bites, everyone stopped eating when they looked at Nick Fury with a serious expression. Immediately, Lynn spoke up. Loki, this guy. Chapter 181, Tricky Loki. Thor arrives. Loki, we must not underestimate him. After all, the other party has lived for thousands of years. Even if the other party is really an idiot, the accumulation of time is enough for him to accumulate rich experience. What's more, the other party is a deity known for deceit and conspiracy. Hearing Lynn's somewhat serious tone, Steve, Tony, Nick Fury also nodded heavily. They saw the scene prophesied before, and naturally they would not underestimate Loki. Otherwise, if an aircraft carrier is destroyed, aren't they mentally retarded? Then, Lynn said lightly. Although we saw the prophecy screen before. However, prophecy cannot be fully believed, it can be changed. Otherwise, what's the point of us coming to the City of Stars? Besides, Loki mainly deals with Avengers. Now that we have entered the City of Starlight, he will not attack the aircraft carrier again. After all, he is not a fool. Hearing this, Bruce asked with some doubts. Then we might as well go back to the aircraft carrier and set a trap to trick Loki into coming in. Wouldn't it be a good way to do this? Hearing this, Lynn shook his head slightly and said softly. Don't forget, the scene predicted just now, because it was triggered passively, many people saw it. With Loki's ability to control people, I can believe that he has definitely planted a dark line in S.H.I.E.L.D. to search our news. 5. Otherwise, the predicted aircraft carrier attack will not go so well. If we really stay on the aircraft carrier and wait quietly, it is very likely that he will not appear until the day Lily is cold. And the City of Stars that we brought, as long as I don't allow it, Loki can't come in if he wants to. So it's very safe here to allow us enough time to negotiate. After Bruce heard it, although he felt that there might be something wrong with what Lynn said, he didn't say much because he had to ask Lynn for help later. For a while, everyone fell silent, and Nick Fury next to him broke the silence first and asked directly. Next, Lynn, what are you going to do? Hearing this, Lynn said lightly. Bruce just suggested there's nothing wrong with just laying a trap to lure Loki to come. We can make arrests. But, 35. Let's not limit ourselves to aircraft carriers. The essence of all Loki's actions is actually to control the Hulk, changed by Bruce Banner. Advertisement. Want to influence or control the Hulk, kill or disrupt the entire Avengers by virtue of his violent nature. 5. So, having said that, Lynn glanced at everyone's faces and said in a deep voice. We simply set a trap through Bruce and snared it. 9. Hearing this, Bruce showed a hesitant expression on his face, as if he wanted to express something. After Lynn saw it, he said comfortingly to Bruce Banner. Bruce, I know what you're worried about. It was nothing more than a worry that the Hulk was out of control, and instead disrupted the entire trapping plan. 35. Hearing this, Bruce nodded silently. On the one hand, this was the reason. On the other hand, he was actually more worried that once it was controlled, it would cause more damage. When I jumped into the Yellow River, I couldn't wash it. As if feeling Bruce's thoughts, Lynn whispered to Bruce. Later, I'll teach you how to freely transform the Hulk. 35. At the same time, I suggest that you can settle in the City of Stars later. Because the future City of Starlight will be the core of the entire Earth's extraordinary world. There will be no shortage of existences like you in the City of Starlight, and there are even people who are stronger than you. So, you don't have to worry about being discriminated against or anything like that. 35. At the same time, whether it's your reputation or your safety, we, Xingyao, will be responsible to the end. Hearing Lynn's promise, Bruce's eyes brightened and he nodded heavily. Nick Fury next to him shook his head slightly after hearing Lynn's promise. It seems that this is the Hulk can't escape Lynn's clutches. However, as long as they successfully enter the City of Shining Stars and obtain the Transcendent System, these benefits are not irreparable. So, he didn't say anything to get in the way. After all, it's Lynn's home now. Still, Nick Fury continued. Lynn, do this as you want, and if you need S.H.I.E.L.D. support, just speak up. But, 35. According to the picture just predicted, Thor may also come to Earth. How should we deal with this? You know, Loki is Thor's younger brother. If we wanted to capture Loki, it might be fine, but if we wanted to kill it, it would be troublesome. 95. Hearing this, Lynn's tone was obviously hesitation, but he said it anyway. Advertisement. Although I can suppress the fans of Thor, after all, the father of God, Odin still exists. We couldn't have killed his son for that. It doesn't make sense to think so much. We are only responsible for arresting, and then let the Earth government do the wrangling. Hearing this, Tony, Steve and others all nodded in agreement. Although they all want to kill Loki directly, but after all, there is still more consideration in action. Immediately afterwards, Lynn changed the subject and said in a deep voice. Right now, the most important thing is to contact Thor. The United States, Houston, Remy Astronomical Laboratory. At this moment, Jane Foss 383 is a little restless. She was working well in New York, but she was suddenly arranged to come to Houston by S.H.I.E.L.D. She had to worry about whether there was an accident, or something to do with Thor. Otherwise, she would not be easily mobilized to work. Thinking of this, Jane complained about Thor in her heart. Thor said before that he would come back to her after finishing the Asgard thing. As a result, almost a whole year has passed, and Thor has no news at all, so he has to feel a little depressed and complain. Right at the moment, suddenly. Boom. As soon as the gunshots rang out. In an instant, Jane became vigilant. The place where she was staying was very safe, even he knew that someone was protecting him in the dark. The sound of gunshots is now heard, no doubt indicating that danger is imminent. So she subconsciously touched the pistol in her pocket, feeling a little reassured in her heart. It was given to him by Phil Coulson before he left, for her protection. Soon. But at the moment, Jane saw a beam of energy suddenly appear from outside the window, and after disappearing, a figure appeared. Boom, boom, boom. Jane began to hear the sound of bursts of gunshots and fighting, and she couldn't help but get nervous. Boom. Sudden. Bang. 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 Thor. Chapter 182 Brave Thor. Sorry Lynn. Asgard, Bifrost, Heimdall, is the news that you just spread true? Jane, is it really about to be in danger? Thor, who walked quickly, asked Heimdall, who was wearing a golden helmet, anxiously. Heimdall nodded heavily after hearing this, and said in a heavy tone. Your Highness, it is true, and the danger is Loki. From what I've seen, he relies on an evil force that wants to rule the entire planet. This is bound to bring chaos to the 9 realms, please make your choice seriously, Your Highness. Hearing this, Thor was silent for a while and said through gritted teeth. I see, Heimdall, now teleport me to Jane's place first. Heimdall nodded and said solemnly after hearing what Thor said. Okay, Your Highness, Bifrost is fixed and ready to teleport. 99. Saying that, he stretched out his hand and pointed inward, signaling Thor to stand there and teleport. After Thor saw it, he strode over to the teleportation point. Seeing this, Heimdall turned the long sword in his hand to open the teleportation channel. Immediately afterwards, a colorful energy beam suddenly appeared, and the instant it disappeared, Thor's figure disappeared without a trace at the same time. Earth, Houston. When it just arrived, with a far longer vision, I instantly saw Jane and Jane who were looking out of the window. The Hydra agent that just broke in. Thor's eyes flashed with cold light, and he quickly waved Mjolnir. Boom. In an instant, huge amounts of crackling sound came from the air, and Mjolnir directly hit the Hydra agent at a speed far exceeding the speed of sound. Jane, who was on the side, just realized that she saw some horrible corpses behind her, and immediately covered her mouth with a look of horror on her face. Soon, Jane felt herself entering a familiar and warm embrace, raised her head slightly, and saw the familiar soft blonde hair with a shallow smile on her face. Immediately afterwards, Thor hugged Jane tightly and said softly. Advertisement. Sorry, Jane, I'm late. Put you in danger. Hearing Thor's gentle tone, Jane recalled the danger just now, and the complaints in her heart disappeared in an instant, and she also held Thor's hands tightly, as if unwilling to leave. The atmosphere at the moment, both of them are a little addicted. But then, Thor heard a lot of footsteps not far away, and felt the strong hostility and killing intent in the distance. His eyes flashed fiercely, and he said comfortingly to Jane. Jane, the enemy is coming, wait a moment, solve the enemy, let's talk in detail. With that said, Thor stretched his hand out of his embrace, stretched out his hand and waved, and Mjolnir appeared in his hand instantly. Immediately afterwards, Thor lifted it high and hammered it down. In an instant, a large amount of thunder appeared in the sky, hitting the advancing Hydra agent. Almost a thunderous attack came down, and the casualties were as high as 80%, causing other Hydra agents to look at each other in dismay. Although they prioritized completing their mission, they still didn't want to die, and they still didn't see the enemy, so they died for no reason. Thor, who was inside, did not care about the thoughts in the brains of these intruders. Seeing the still existing Hydra agent, he stretched out his hand to summon Mjolnir, ready to summon thunder again to destroy the enemy. At the moment, not far from Thor, a sparking portal suddenly appeared. Mountains and seas, the city of stars, the command room. Sir, Madam Jane Foster has been found attacked. At the same time, a large amount of thunder energy fluctuations was detected, and it is suspected that Thor is coming. 99. Excuse me, are you sending someone to greet Lord Thor? Tony, Steve and the others heard Vera's voice, glanced at Lynn, and started packing. From what they knew about Lynn, this time they were definitely not sitting idly by. Sure enough, I heard people talking about getting ready for action. Then, they saw Lynn who opened the portal, and passed through the portal without hesitation. Advertisement. Steve, who had just walked out of the portal, looked at a large number of Hydra agents struck by lightning, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. This big man is too weak. Immediately afterwards, seeing Thor's vigilant eyes, he waved his hand slightly, indicating no hostility. Soon, Thor saw Lynn's figure, with a bold smile on his face, and said loudly. Backquote, Lynn, I didn't expect you to come so quickly. Quote. After hearing what Thor said, Lynn walked up to him with an apologetic expression and said. I'm so sorry Thor, just received the news that Jane was attacked. 5. I should send someone to move Jane to a safer position. Hearing this, Thor shook his head slightly and said seriously. Lin, it's not your fault, because it's from Loki. Loki wants to kidnap Jane to threaten me. Hearing this, Lin nodded in agreement and said in a deep voice. I also got word that this is an agent controlled by Loki, and he now wants to rule the entire planet. 5. Good money Zhao, we won't let something like this happen. Speaking of this, Lin's tone changed and became a little gentle. Thor, now that the situation is urgent, I won't gossip with you. We have just moved to a new location and it is safe. 35. Would you and Jane come with me? I believe that Jane's safety can absolutely be guaranteed. After Thor heard this, he nodded in agreement. So, Lin waved his hand, and a portal with sparks appeared again in front of everyone. Thor saw with his own eyes that the opposite was a very trusting stride in the command room. Immediately afterwards, Steve and others also finished investigating the fallen Hydra agent, and sent a message with a slight frown. Then go back to the command room of City of Stars through the portal. Chapter 183 Insight Plan. Trap. Shanhai Ji, the command room of the City of Shining Stars. Thor just passed through the portal and entered the world of mountains and seas, and a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. He found that the elemental energy here has risen a lot, at least twice as high as the Earth. However, he didn't care. As far as he knew, there were countless ways to gather energy, and it was nothing more than the arrangement of formations or other means of energy gathering here. After everyone passed through the portal, Thor asked Lin anxiously. Lin, what information have you gathered about Loki so far? Hearing this, seeing Thor's anxious expression, Lin shook his head slightly and said. Thor, no accurate information has been collected yet, Loki, it's too deep. He controlled a large number of agents, and with the help of these agents, he was very easy to hide his whereabouts, leading us to have no results. Hearing this, Thor said helplessly to the crowd. Go as fast as you can. I received news that Loki is not alone this time, there is an extremely large evil force behind him. If you really wait for Loki to gain a firm foothold on Earth, I'm afraid it will be very troublesome to try to chase him again. Hearing this, Nick Fury, Tony, Steve and others 387 nodded solemnly. Immediately afterwards, Tony seemed to think of something and asked Lin. Lin, how is Pepper's safety status? Won't he be attacked too? Hearing this, Lin looked at the phone interface, this is the latest news updated by Vera, and said seriously. Tony, don't worry about Pepper. Although I just received news that someone wanted to hijack Pepper, but was stopped by our team. Then, Lin whispered to the crowd. I know you may be concerned that your family and friends may suffer unintentional harm. But don't worry, we Xingyao and S.H.I.E.L.D. will keep your relatives and friends safe. Having said that, Nico Fury next to him stood up, nodded heavily, and said in a deep voice. I had arranged for the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent to keep them safe. Hearing Lin and Nick Fury's assurances, everyone's faces softened a lot. Then, Lin said in a deep voice. Advertisement. Okay, now the most important thing is how to catch Loki's trail. Asahi, he must not be allowed to act recklessly. Then, Lin looked around, gave Bruce a heavy look, and continued. I have an idea that everyone can take a look at, is it feasible? According to our previous analysis, Loki wanted to control the Hulk and have an impact on us at Avengers. So, can we use this condition to trap Loki? As long as he starts, all of us will be besieged collectively, I believe he will never escape. 99. Hearing this, everyone began to think, but Bruce Banner's face was a little ugly, and he opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something. Although he hoped that the whole world would be peaceful, he still felt a little inappropriate about using him as a bait. Noticing Bruce Banner's face, Lin said softly to Bruce Banner. Bruce, rest assured, I will keep you safe. 35. Also, as I said before, I will do my best to help you. The next day, New York, S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters Trident building. Pierce looked at Nick Fury in front of him and said seriously. Fury, how did things work out? Hearing this, Nick Fury rubbed his brows and said helplessly. There is no clue yet, the other party is hiding too deeply. He controls a large number of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents and has a solid understanding of our S.H.I.E.L.D. search process. 35. No trace at all. Hearing this, Pierce's face also turned ugly, as if he was half disgusted by Loki. Take full control of the minds of others and serve yourself. This ability is really disgusting, especially for a Hydra like him. As long as you grab a high level and follow the clues, you can quickly control a large number of Hydra agents. And he himself didn't dare to make a big splash, for fear of being spotted by Nick Fury and other S.H.I.E.L.D. members. Think about it. The members of S.H.I.E.L.D. suddenly discover that other forces are rescuing their colleagues. How would you think? Advertisement. Every fool knows that his colleague is not simple, maybe he is an undercover agent of other forces. When the time comes, Hydra may not be able to hide when the review is really carried out. On the contrary, if rescued through the process of S.H.I.E.L.D. After the rescue is successful, although it will pass the review, the entire review department is theirs, and there will be no problems. Therefore, Pierce is now tied up. What worries him most now is that Loki directly starts preaching the existence of Hydra. Leak him out. At that time, the real nose is not the nose, and the face is not the face. Thinking of this, Pierce became a little anxious, a ruthless look flashed in his eyes, but his face remained unchanged, and said to Nick Fury. Fury, in the face of such a crisis, none of us could have imagined. Now, I suggest, start the Insight program. Once the Insight program is launched, we will have some control over whatever Loki does. 35. As soon as he shows up, we immediately block it. I believe that a mere alien can capsize. Hearing this, Nick Fury hesitation for a moment, a smile flashed in his eyes, but he said with some hesitation. This won't work. The Insight project must not be activated right now, in case Loki does it. 35. That's the real catastrophe. Hearing this, Pierce looked at Nick Fury coldly, as if secretly made up his mind, but said calmly. Well, it's all up to you. 9. It would be easier to rule the planet if you controlled the top spy chiefs on the entire planet. So he said in a low voice. Ward knelt down on one knee and said respectfully to Loki in front of him. A mysterious abandoned factory in New York City. Master, we have received confirmation of Nick Fury's whereabouts. Now you are the SHIELD director. Hearing his subordinate's reply, Loki's eyes flashed with joy. After all, gather all the power to capture Nick Fury. Chapter 184 Loki's Trap. Lynn's Trap. The United States, New York. Nick Fury was alone, humming and driving toward a safe house. It seemed that he was in a good mood. The speed was normal, and when it reached a traffic light, it stopped. At the same time, Nick Fury looked out the car window and saw a police car next to him, and a white policeman in the police car was looking at him. As if seeing suspicion in his eyes, Nick Fury replied directly. Look at what? This is my car. The white policeman looked away. Sudden boom. A police car from behind slammed into the black car driven by Nick Fury, and then the police car in front of him suddenly backed away. Clip Nick Fury. Must not move in the middle. And at the moment Nick Fury had just reacted from the safety measures in the car, touched the blood on his head, and flashed anger in his eyes. So he directly ordered the artificial intelligence in the car to restart and escape from the predicament. At the same time, Nick Fury saw with his own eyes the familiar battering ram next to his vehicle, pounding his bulletproof glass like a hammer. Sir, the bulletproof glass is 40% shattered. The degree of fragmentation has reached 70%. 35. Do you want to turn on the attack system? 35. Hearing the news from the onboard artificial intelligence in his ear, Nick Fury ordered. Hold on. In a few seconds, the battering ram was about to smash the bulletproof glass, and the glass was about to make a shattering sound. Nick Fury shouted directly. Attack. Bang. 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 In an instant, a small machine gun appeared in the middle of the car and started to fire automatically. At the same time, Nick Fury shouted while holding the machine gun while pulling the steering wheel. Start. Turn on the maximum power. In almost a few seconds, all the attackers around the car were shot and killed. Immediately after, Nick's car began to move back and forth, and with its powerful power, it broke through the siege of the front and rear cars. Immediately afterwards, Nick Fury drove the car and fled into the distance. Behind him, all kinds of vehicles were chasing after Nick Fury frantically, as if they could not achieve their goals and would never stop. Advertisement. With Nick Fury's proficient driving skills, although he did not get rid of the pursuit behind, he always drove in the front. The people behind seemed to have some scruples, and did not dare to attack directly with weapons similar to rocket launchers. Only use pistols for strafing or increase the speed of the vehicle. As time slowly passed, the pursuit cars gradually drove to the fringes of the city. The sound of gunshots became more and more frequent, and it was obvious to the naked eye that the black car driven by Nick Fury appeared to be shattered in a large area. On a highway, Nick Fury suddenly stopped. Because he found that there were a large number of agents blocking him, and he even saw a lot of familiar faces from inside. The only feature they have in common is a faint layer of black mist on their eyes. Seeing such a situation, Nick Fury sighed inwardly. He took out 2 submachine guns from the back and clipped them to his waist, got out of the car, and shouted to the front. Come out, Loki, I know it's you. Don't hide anymore. As if hearing Nick Fury's shouting, in front of the crowd blocking in front, wearing golden armor and wearing a golden antler helmet, Loki showed his figure. Said to Nick Fury with a bit of sarcasm. I didn't expect you, Nick Fury, to fall into my hands. In the past few days, I have heard a lot about your deeds from your agent. 9. I think that in the future I will rule the earth, and I need people like you. So give it up. Don't keep resisting, you've got far more than you thought. 35. Hearing what Loki said, Nick Fury sneered. Listen, look at our Loki, who still believes he can rule the earth. Immediately afterwards, the tone changed, and Nick Fury said sarcastically with a strange smile on his face. You are sure that I fell into your hands, not? You entered our trap. At the same time, Nick Fury shouted directly. Go. When the voice fell, he quickly dodged into the car, and at the same time, above the car, 5 figures suddenly appeared, all floating in the air. The leader was Thor with Mjolnir in his hand, followed by Tony, Bruce, Natasha Romanoff and Barton. Thor saw the lead Loki, and landed directly, galloping towards Loki. Advertisement. 0. Ask for flowers. Tony and the others at the back glanced at it and didn't care, and flew directly in the air towards the group of agents behind. At the same time, it started to attack actively, and a large number of bullets and laser cannons intertwined, killing a large number of Hydra agents. At the same time, Bruce Banner flew to a position and began to fall to the ground, his body suddenly swelled and turned into the Hulk. Then run frantically and attack these Hydra agents. With a random wave of the hand, 2 or 3 agents were knocked into the air, and at the same time, a large amount of blood was spit out, causing them to be seriously injured. The whole scene can be said to be crushed. At the back, Natasha Romanoff and Barton started to shoot from a distance, killing those Hydra agents who were injured and had not lost their ability to move. At this moment, Thor, seeing Loki in front of him, his voice was a little deep, and he persuaded. Loki, go back to Asgard with me, the king will spare you. 95. You will always be my brother. Hearing this, Loki said coldly. Be your king of Asgard, don't bother me being king of Midgard. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude. 9. With that said, Loki waved the training in his hand, and the scepter emitted a laser, which landed on the flat ground in front of Thor. Seeing this scene, Thor shouted loudly. Looks like I'll have to take you back to Asgard by force. 35. Saying that, Mjolnir in his hand raised and attacked like Loki. Roar. Thor passed directly through Loki's body, and he suddenly realized that it was just a phantom, and the real Loki was nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, Loki's phantom laughed. Although Loki ran away this time, most of the Hydra attacks were exposed this time, and they were basically killed. Thor, you can't stop me, go back to your Asgard. 99. At the same time, the attack of Tony and others has come to an end. After speaking, the phantom suddenly disappeared, and Thor could clearly feel that there was no Loki nearby. Seeing this scene, Nick Fury had a relieved smile on his face. Leftover. His face became unsightly. It's about to see Lynn and Steve 8. Chapter 185 Change Cognition. Lynn's mission. New York, Trident Building. Hill led Lynn and Steve towards the main entrance of the building. Lynn and Nick Fury have already negotiated, and Nick Fury is willing to use all the power of S.H.I.E.L.D. to promote the implementation of the City of Stars on a global scale, and will not be blocked too much by the authorities. And Lynn needs to help Nick Fury clean up the Hydra remnants in S.H.I.E.L.D. At the heart of the whole plan is Loki's control of Hydra. Nick Fury will help Loki get a lot of Hydra information from the side, push Loki to control a lot of Hydra, and play a greedy heart. The more control Loki has, the more pressure on Pierce. After all, these are his subordinates, his strength. The more stressed Pierce is, the easier it is to get knocked out. He has always been cautious in terms of 387, but Loki controls a large number of Hydra. As long as he has the bait to set up traps, he can clear it on a large scale. And without the slightest burden. After all, people are controlled, they are all enemies. When fighting, not letting go is the most correct choice, and no one can make a mistake. Meanwhile, with Loki ostensibly controlling the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent on a large scale, Nick Fury and Lynn can use this as an excuse to control the Hydra agent. Nick Fury knows you have the means to screen, control people. So, this kind of thing is specifically handed over to Lynn. On the one hand, Lynn ability is special, which can quickly filter who listens to S.H.I.E.L.D. and who listens to Hydra. Pierce, on the other hand, has to be caught, and only Lynn can be sure. Because, they need the fact that, all black pot, no, all orders are given by Pierce. Including this internal screening, annihilate the controlled. As for Nick Fury, what does that have to do with him? He's on the verge of being attacked on a massive scale by Loki's men. Pierce is his good friend, and his relationship with him is, at most, revenge for him. Nothing else to talk about. And Nick Fury, who will surely inherit Pierce's legacy, continue to fight Loki and the controlled to the end. Advertisement. Well, who is this controlled person? Naturally it is Hydra. Who let Loki take control of Hydra? There's nothing wrong with this logic. Lynn and Steve followed Hill into the Trident building. Seeing people coming and going, a large number of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents walked in a hurry, sighing slightly. It looks like it will definitely be busy today. As soon as their thoughts changed, the two followed Hill into the elevator and walked towards the top floor. Lynn, who was sitting in the elevator, said softly. Immediate thoughts. Can't leave the Trident building today. 35. In an instant, with Lynn at the center, a white light began to spread rapidly around, and a thought appeared in the minds of all the people who were shrouded in the Middle East. Can't leave the Trident building today. And according to this idea, a lot of reasons appeared in their minds. There is work today, there is discussed to go home, and the boss may have orders today, etc. All in all, the fact that they cannot leave the Trident building today has been deeply implanted in their minds. Hill and Steve next to them were unaware of the thoughts in their minds. In their perception, they really cannot leave the Trident building today, because they want to destroy the enemy. Even if the extermination is successful, you cannot leave immediately, at least until tomorrow. Everything is just in case. Lynn made preparations in advance and was able to perceive the changes in everyone's thoughts, especially the psychological changes of Hill and Steve, who were closest to him, and couldn't help showing a satisfied smile on his face. Well, implanting thoughts is the result of his research on spiritual magic. Once successful, you can change the cognition of ordinary people from the depths of their hearts, allowing them to naturally identify with the generation of thoughts. FFT. Pierce is definitely not leaving the three-plug building today. At present, at most, he can only think about blocking by geographical advantage, or, if he fails, he will become a benevolent. Even if someone advised him, he would grit his teeth. This is the distortion of cognition, and it is fortunate that the power of the words is so powerful that the magic can be cast so smoothly. Advertisement. The elevator went up layer by layer, and soon, it reached the top floor. After getting out of the elevator, Hill took the two directly to Pierce's office. When they came over today, they had already received the news that Pierce was in his office. There were knocks on the door. Pierce said, "Come in." There is no defense in his heart, on the contrary, there is only a sense of excitement. Nick Fury won't survive this time if his plan goes according to plan. And the most important thing now is to push one of his own people up and continue to open the Insight plan. Thinking about it, Pierce saw the three people who came in, and there was a hint of vigilance in his eyes. Lynn, Steve, Hill and Nick Fury have a close relationship. Come together now, will there be anything other than Nick Fury? For planning, for order, don't blame me for procrastinating. Immediately, Pierce spoke, his tone full of indifference. Hill, what are you looking for with us? The captain and advisor Lynn are here too, which is rare. Hearing this, Lynn smiled without explaining, and glanced at the office that was retreating around. He said coldly to Pierce, "Okay, my Hydra 0.8, let's not go around the corner. Confinement. This time, UHYDRAs will never escape." Then, he heard, Lynn whispered. In an instant, a pale green light surrounded Pierce's entire body, and within a few seconds, Pierce suddenly found that he couldn't move his hands and feet, and couldn't move at all. Unfortunately, he can't even change his expression now, but his eyes are full of horror. Puppet control. When the voice fell, I saw Pierce's ugly expression, and then, saw him secretly put his right hand into the underside of the desk in front of him, as if he was groping for something. Seeing this, Lynn smiled slightly, and said softly, not intending to continue watching Pierce in action. Chapter 186. Pierce died in the line of duty. Puppet control. As soon as Lynn's words fell, Pierce instantly found that his hands and feet began to move. 18. You can't control yourself at all. As if responding to what Lynn said just now, he became a puppet-like existence. The fear in my heart suddenly rose. I am Hydra. 35. Especially when he found a slightly hoarse, but very familiar voice coming out of his mouth, Pierce was even more frightened in his heart. What that meant, he knew very well. Lynn is completely capable of destroying Hydra in large numbers through her own identity. And Lynn nodded with satisfaction when she heard the familiar tone from her control puppet. Looking at the horrified expressions in the eyes of Steve and Hill next to him, he said indifferently. Okay, we have done the most crucial part. The rest, let our Mr. Pierce play. Saying that, he controlled Pierce to smile at everyone, making Hill and Steve look weird. Inexplicable feeling strange. Oh, as for Pierce's inner fear, Lynn wouldn't say much even if he knew it. Pierce's people are in his hands, so there is nothing to worry about. Immediately afterwards, Lynn set his sights on Hill, and at the moment Hill also understood what he was going to do, took out his mobile phone, pulled out a picture of the building structure, and explained to Lynn about this one room. Lynn, according to the plan appointed by the director, we can set a trap in room 2 on the 15th floor to bring in the Hydra people and let them kill each other. At the same time, I also arranged for my own people to witness and publicize this matter. Speaking of which, Hill's tone clearly revealed a hint of playfulness. Guaranteed to blow our name, Chief Pierce. Pierce next to him, heard what Hill said, and his heart shook violently. He now fully understands Hill or Nick Fury's plans. Doesn't this make him take the blame? No matter who knows about a lot of Hydra sneaking into S.H.I.E.L.D., I really won't trust S.H.I.E.L.D. It can only be resolved internally and try to cover up the news. Advertisement. But with the current Hydra's power in S.H.I.E.L.D., it basically has an absolute advantage. Even if the Nick Fury counterattacked according to the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, it would not be able to beat the current Hydra. And now I met the Loki thing. And Loki's control of people has spread widely within Hydra. As long as he gives orders through his body, a puppet is called roar for some people. Then let the flow open the prelude of cannibalism. Dude, Hydra was already miserable enough, and Loki controlled most of them. Now again, cannibalism, this is not the end of the game. Thinking of this, Pierce was a little terrified, and Roar called his body to be controlled by Lynn. But, his body picked up the phone next to him under Lynn's face. Although he was afraid, his voice was full of indifference. Ryla, tell us all to go to meeting room 2 on the 15th floor and be there in 30 minutes. There is a big announcement. Immediately afterwards, he made another call and continued speaking. Kevin, call the people from the combat team to come over, and there will be tasks later. Under Lynn's control, Pierce made several consecutive calls. Either order the men of Hydra to gather together, or have them armed and ready. For a moment, Pierce watched uncontrolled behavior in his heart, heard a familiar voice, and filled his heart with despair. Done. HYDRA's legacy in S.H.I.E.L.D. will be destroyed in my hands. Lin didn't pay attention to Pierce's psychological changes. In short, he was a dead man in the end, so what was there to pay attention to? The best reputation is better, but he died in the line of duty. Time passed by minute by minute. The conference room on the 15th floor gradually gathered a large number of Hydra agents. At the same time, a large number of fighters began to gather upstairs. I saw Pierce standing alone on the high platform, looking at the fighters below, and said aloud. Everyone, after our careful investigation, we finally discovered all the puppets controlled by the evil god Loki. Advertisement. As long as it is eliminated, we will no longer have to hide our tracks and avoid the logical mind control. Just now, before they found out, I have gathered them together by means. Wait a while, I give an order, you all go in and destroy the battle. 35. Steve, Hill and Lin, who were invisible next to them, looked at the scene in front of them and couldn't help but feel a little surprised. This puppet control is simply perfect. Later, I heard Pierce begin to explain some details. Although everyone was puzzled, they nodded heavily after a long period of brainwashing. Hydra hail, Hydra hail. As Pierce ends with Hydra hail, so do the others, and the sound is full of excitement. On the other side was Li En, who sighed a little. The Hydra organization has many shortcomings, but it does have its own uniqueness in the governance of the 387th Ministry. Although the means of brainwashing are frequently used, it is rare for cohesion and organization to reach such a level. Asia. This is inseparable from the evil methods commonly used by dark organizations. With his thoughts turning, he looked at the time in his hand and gave Pierce a direct order to act. In an instant, Pierce was only heard shouting to the crowd. Get started now. Everyone enters the conference room on the 15th floor, and no one of the puppets can escape. All for order, all for Hydra. After all the fighters heard it, their faces became serious, and they quickly walked to the door in turn. The Lin trio followed closely behind. Pierce was controlled by Lin to return to his office without doing anything else. Pierce's current death is worthless, because now only the Hydra agent at the SHIELD headquarters is wiped out. Behind, there are a large number of Hydra agents outside, which need to be encircled and suppressed under Pierce's order. After all the work is completed, it is the opportunity for him to die in the line of duty. It's also time for Nick Fury's comeback. Well, Nick Fury said that he was going to give his old boss a treat with sadness and nostalgia. Chapter 187 Hydra of Cannibalism. Watching the members of the Special Operations team pour into the huge conference room on the 15th floor. Lin said softly, insanity. When the two Hydras meet, he is not sure if there will be a fight. But he only needs a slight push, and the battle will definitely appear quickly. As his voice fell, a scarlet light instantly appeared around the conference room, covering everyone. With Lin waving lightly, Hill, Steve, including Pierce felt their eyes light up, and they could actually see the scene in the conference room. Pierce, in particular, didn't change his vision even though his body didn't move. He saw with his own eyes that bloodshot eyes appeared in his agent's eyes, and some were even completely shrouded in a blood-colored light. Constantly shooting, even holding a knife in melee combat, a knife fell, and a lot of blood spurted out, contaminating everyone. Some Hydra agents seemed to be stimulated by the smell of blood, and their actions became more and more spicy, with deadly knives and headshots. For a time, a large number of bloodstains could be seen everywhere in the entire conference room. It may be that SHIELD has done a good job in sound insulation, and everyone outside only heard a slight noise, which is at most the loudness of knocking on the door. However, seeing this scene in front of him, Pierce's eyes were filled with anger and despair. On the contrary, Lin's eyes revealed a hint of appreciation, or a hint of pleasure. This group of Hydra is simply dog skin plaster. You can meet them anywhere, which is really frustrating. As time passed, under the gaze of Lin et al., there were fewer and fewer Hydra agents standing in the conference room. Either fall to the ground and bleed too much to death, or just pant slightly, not far from death. As the last Hydra agent killed his own enemy, he surrounded the four centers with daggers, and his eyes were blank. Lin walked in and said softly, "Advertisement. Wind blade." In an instant, a light blue wind blade slid across his head, and he fell to the ground and died. The recent Hill and Steve saw the meeting room covered in blood, expressionless. Maybe experienced more on the battlefield. But for Lin, it was still slightly uncomfortable. Immediately, he said softly, "Clean, clear." Accompanied by a silver-white ray of light covering the entire conference room, under the eyes of everyone, all the blood was rapidly reduced as if a straw appeared out of thin air, and even the red blood was also reduced at a speed visible to the naked eye. Soon, the smell of blood in the conference room disappeared, and Lin repressed the news to the sweet air and nodded slightly. Steve, who was standing next to him, was a little surprised when he saw this scene, and then he was a little disappointed. He found that when he came to the SHIELD headquarters today, he seemed to have done nothing. Slight discomfort. Lin next to him seemed to perceive Steve's emotions, and said to Steve very sincerely, "Captain, I can't be one foot after another outside the Hydra base. The rest, I'll leave it to you, and I'll send Bucky to fight with you later." 35. You are Hydra's nemesis. I believe that this time Hydra will never escape the rest of our big net. With that said, Lin commanded Pierce in a deep voice. Later, you follow Captain Steve's orders and answer all his questions. The controlled Pierce paused, looked at Steve for 3 seconds, as if to confirm something, and said in a deep voice. Okay, Master. Everything follows your orders. After a few words with Hill and Steve, they opened the portal and returned to the City of Stars. Advertisement. His time is precious and cannot be wasted. Besides, Hydra is only a disease of psoriasis, its strength is weak, but its concealment is too strong. Taking control of Pierce now is like having the key to the vault. With a slight twist, you can find the trace, and the rest depends on how to clean it up. Now, he's a little curious about Loki's choice. He was left with 2 traps before. One is the Hulk and the other is Nick Fury. No matter which trap he stepped into, all will suffer heavy losses, and there will be no more high-quality men in a short period of time. New York, in an abandoned factory. Loki looked at Ward, who was standing across from him, covered in scars, with a hint of anger in his eyes. He collected hundreds of Hydra agents, and the result was burnt. This is his hard work for a long time, and as a result, he was wiped out by his crazy big brother. Backquote. How many of us are there now? Ward looked at Loki with eyes filled with black mist, paused, as if thinking, and said. After thinking for a while, a trace of ruthlessness flashed in his eyes, and he said coldly. I'll go see the wounded, you'll lead the way. The remaining 12 people also need a certain amount of time to rest before they can enter the battle. Looking at Ward in front of him, Loki shouted back coldly. Master, this time we have suffered heavy losses. Hearing Ward's reply, the anger in Loki's eyes grew stronger, as if he could breathe out fire. Out of 200 agents, only 25 survived, 13 of them were seriously injured, and I am afraid they have no combat ability. Chapter 188 Loki the Loki. Dark Puppet. Okay, Master. Hearing Loki's order, Ward replied in a deep voice, then took the lead and walked towards the medical room. The factory appears to be abandoned, but in fact, it is a small stronghold of their Hydra. In the underground, all kinds of equipment are very complete. There are also treatment rooms. Loki follows Ward in the elevator into Hydra's underground base. Every time he entered this underground base, Loki felt a little bit of disgust from the bottom of his heart. His life should be lived brightly under the sun, not like a bug nesting in the ground all day. This is also where he has been criticizing Hydra. But, the bigger picture is now. Affected by the Avengers trap, a lot of combat power has been lost. He now needs replenishment and combat power. Loki stood in the treatment room and looked at the seriously injured, slightly injured Hydra agent lying on the bed. A fierce look flashed in his eyes. Holding the spiritual scepter, he tapped the ground heavily. In an instant, a scarlet light centered on the scepter spread around. It can be seen with the naked eye that a large amount of strange red light gathers on the forehead of each wounded, and gradually spreads 390 from the forehead to the limbs. Every wounded person lying on the bed, no matter if they were slightly injured or seriously injured, their bodies kept twitching. It was as if the pain was beyond what they could bear. As time passed slowly, the body of each wounded was gradually dyed with a gray-black color. Ward watched from the side, and he seemed to be able to see the strength of each body greatly increased. But at the same time, the faces of every wounded person became dull. 151. Become a puppet. Thoughts turned. Ward shivered subconsciously. However, due to the influence of mind control, there is still no disrespect to Loki. Soon, Loki looked at the puppet who got off the hospital bed and stood in front of him, with a large number of gray-black runes appearing all over his body. His eyes were dull, and he exuded a mysterious aura. Advertisement. There was a smile in his eyes. Picking up the spiritual scepter, all the dark puppets knelt down neatly on one knee. Seeing this, Loki said with a hint of pride in his tone. My warriors, you will enjoy the glory of the kingdom of God in the future. Now, let's start reordering. At the same time, Thor, Bruce Banner, Black Widow Natasha Romanoff, Hawkeye Barton, and Mid-Speed rushed to the abandoned factory. They left their way of tracking when they were under siege. Although Loki performs space transfer through the space cube, and shields by means, they still find Loki's current location through a series of clues. So galloped, and Loki was bound to fight. Loki with Mind Gem and Space Gem, the longer he survives, the greater the damage to the Earth and the harder it is to catch. They had just entered the abandoned factory, and Loki seemed to sense something, with a sneer on his face. First, the mind-wielding scepter carved a few lines of Asgard text on the wall. Then he waved his hand lightly, Tesseract appeared in front of him, the spiritual scepter touched slightly, and in an instant, the indigo light enveloped them. Space shift. Loki took the Hydra agent and disappeared after the light disappeared. At this moment, Thor led the Avengers to the treatment room of the base. Perceiving the spatial fluctuations that had just remained, Thor sighed slightly. Immediately afterwards, everyone saw that a dazzling red light began to emit from the wall. After the light disappeared, a line of Asgard characters came into view. Facing the doubts of Bruce Banner and others, Thor sighed deeply and said, This is our Asgard text, Loki's message to me waiting. It is also a clarion call for war. 35. Asahi, he said, it's bound to cost us. Let's see the real horror. Hearing Thor's explanation, Black Widow Natasha Romanoff and Hawkeye Barton were obviously a little dignified. First press the earphone hanging on the ear and whisper a few words. He comforted Thor and the others. Thor, Bruce, let's go back to the City of Stars first. Let's discuss. What should we do now? Hearing Black Widow Natasha Romanoff's soothing words, Thor nodded. Advertisement. He now felt that his brother Loki was really dying, and he had to hurry up and get him back. Afterwards, he took out a jade tablet engraved with runes, injected energy slightly, a portal opened, and everyone entered. City of Stars, conference room. Lynn, how's your business going? Nick Fury's tone revealed a hint of a smile, or more appropriately cheerful. His plan was successful, not to mention S.H.I.E.L.D. as Hydra, just killing Loki's Hydra agent is enough to make him happy. Not to mention that this time Lynn personally shot, Pierce and others should not be able to escape. Lynn looked at Nick Fury, who was in a good mood, nodded slightly, and said in a relaxed tone. Rest assured, everything is planned. 9. Hydra starts civil war, Pierce is killed in the line of duty. Hearing Lynn's answer, Nick Fury nodded with a smile, as if thinking of something, and said. S.H.I.E.L.D. will help you do what I promised you before. 35. From now on, we will be the most loyal allies. Hearing this, Lynn also revealed a smile on his face, but he didn't think so in his heart. What kind of person is Nick Fury, doesn't he know? Typical of skepticism etched in the bones. He has no plan for the City of Stars in his heart now, and it is no problem to cut off his head and play a ball. This kind of scene is just talking, just listening. In the back, the interests have to speak. At the same time, a sparking portal appeared in the open space next to the conference room. Thor, Bruce and others walked out one after another. Seeing the people with sad faces on their faces, Lynn knew the whole thing in an instant. Isn't that just Loki running again? Normally, Loki with the space gem wants to run too easily. Unless, he can't use the space gem for now. So, Lynn tapped the table and made a crisp sound, speaking to the crowd. Now, let's discuss what's next. Chapter 189 3 Wormholes. New York Battle. Thor, tell me about the results of this hunt for Loki. Lynn smiled at Thor and asked gently. Thor may have felt that his first move failed, and replied with some embarrassment. This time, I didn't succeed in capturing Loki, just killed a lot of his hands. But, speaking of this, Thor's tone turned and became a little serious. When we hunted down Loki just now, he managed to escape, leaving provocative words. From what I know about him, he's not just talking. It's about having confidence, and about to act. So, we have to be careful. Hearing this, Lynn frowned helplessly and sighed. That's what it says. But be careful, where do you start? When do we Loki start operations? Where do we start? What is he going to do? Thor and Tony both looked at each other with a hint of helplessness between their eyebrows. But, Nick Fury's eyes on Lynn were strange, he hadn't forgotten. The prophecy that Lynn first showed him. This acting has won an Oscar. Bruce Banner next to him thought about it, and said hesitation. Lynn, I may have some guesses as to where Loki's action took place. According to the information collected in the past few days, there are changes in the gamma rays in New York. 39. I suspect that Loki may be in New York to carry out his operations. 35. Hearing this, Lynn nodded silently, thought for a moment, and asked Thor in a deep voice. Thor, tell us all about it. What kind of character was Loki in his life? Advertisement. What did he like? What did he hate? What was the greatest wish of his life? After Thor heard it, he pondered for a while, and then said a little embarrassedly. Loki, he's my brother, this. Probably his greatest wish in life was to take the throne of Asgard. 35. If he hates it, maybe it's me, because he thinks I'm going to take his throne. I like it, he likes exquisite enjoyment, likes the admiration of everyone, definitely, and also likes the throne. Having said that, Thor's tone obviously paused, as if thinking of something, he continued. By the way, he likes drama, he is a famous drama master in Asgard, and he has directed many dramas that are popular in the 9 kingdoms. 5. Hearing this, Lynn's eyes lit up, and she said with joy in her tone. In saying that, Loki is doing a big thing, and he wants everyone to see it, everyone knows it. Can I say so? 39. After Thor heard it, he thought about it and nodded. It seems so. After seeing Thor's determined action, Lynn said it directly. Well, that being the case, let's look for the best places in New York that are most suitable for performances. He likes to be condescending, and he likes everyone to look up. Everyone can think about it. Saying that, he also said to Nick Fury next to him. Fury, S.H.I.E.L.D. has an agent who specializes in portraying characters. 35. According to Thor's analysis, let them deduce Loki, which may appear in New York. Organizing a document, where do we focus on? When Nick Fury heard this, a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes, and he nodded. He was now quite sure that Lynn absolutely had other prophecies in his hands. And it's closely related to Loki's actions. Otherwise, the order would not be so certain. Unfortunately, I have no evidence to show that. 0. Katakana middle dot ask for flowers katakana middle dot. Plus, now we have to rely on Starlight for Hydra. Advertisement. Otherwise, or else you can lay a foreshadowing and cause a gap. 3 hours later, Lin sat at the table and saw the speculative information on the white paper in front of her, putting helpless eyes on Tony. Meanwhile, the same goes for Nick Fury, Bruce Banner, Thor and others. Because on the paper it says, it is speculated that the probability of Loki choosing the Stark building is 90%. Whose lair is this? No words needed. 0. Stark building, top floor lounge. Wearing golden armor, Loki strolled leisurely through this lounge. He held a glass of red wine in his hand, with a smile on his face, and occasionally took a sip, as if tasting the wonderful taste of this glass of red wine. And behind him, 10 dark puppet warriors stood behind him, with a large number of black runes engraved all over their bodies, exuding an evil aura. I saw Loki's glass of wine standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching New York City beneath the tall buildings. See the rising and falling high-rise buildings and the endless crowds. With a frenzy in his eyes, he shouted loudly, "This world will eventually belong to me." At the same time, the Stark building suddenly trembled. Everyone in the building panicked. And Loki, his eyes are full of calm, mixed with a hint of arrogance. I saw, to the top floor of the Stark industrial building, 3 dark blue rays of light shot like the sky. Almost 2 or 3 seconds. Over New York City, everyone noticed, 3 black holes began to slowly appear. It's a bit slow, but it continues to expand. A sparking portal emerges from behind Loki. Chapter 190. Miserable New York. Intractable healing power. Facing the sudden portal, Loki felt a little panic in his heart, and immediately stretched out his hand to signal the dark puppet warrior behind him to attack. He turned around and disappeared suddenly. At the moment, Lin stepped out 1 step, followed by Tony, Steve, Bruce Banner, Thor and others out of the portal in turn. Seeing the dark puppet warrior rushing towards his face, Lin frowned slightly and muttered quickly, "Wind blade." In an instant, several light cyan wind blades appeared out of thin air, and then quickly struck the enemy. Hiss. The wind blade slid across the head of the dark puppet at high speed, and a slight sound flashed. But then, a faint red light emitted from the incision, which quickly healed the wound. It was the neck, but the puppet continued to attack as if it didn't feel anything. When Thor, Steve and the others at the back saw it, Wei, 390s, was a little surprised. But he didn't think much about it and went straight forward. Steve directly used his shield to hit the dark puppet, knocking it up heavily. But then, the opponent seemed to be harmless, stood up like a robot, and rushed forward. So Steve hurried forward and started a fierce battle. Thor, Bruce Banner and others dare not fall behind. I saw Thor holding Mjolnir to summon thunder and lightning, and slashed directly at the dark puppet. Immediately it was split into coke, but with the flow of a large amount of scarlet light, the surface of the coke cracked outwards, revealing bright red flesh and returned into skin. There was only a pause in the middle, and he continued to attack like Thor. Tony Stark next to him, wearing a battle armor, fired a large number of bullets, repeatedly knocking back the puppet, but the opponent quickly healed his wounds and slowly attacked forward with a storm of bullets. Seeing the dark puppet's powerful healing power, everyone couldn't help but stab their tongues secretly. Seeing this, Lin frowned slightly. Such healing power, if not restricted, would probably consume a lot of time. After thinking about it, he said tentatively to the puppet in front of him, "Weaken the half-layer healing power of the dark puppet." In an instant, Lin found that his wealth had dropped by 10 million and was still rapidly depleting. Immediately ordered a ban. This time, even instantly knew where the dark puppet, the terrifying healing power came from. Mind Gem. Advertisement. It's definitely the Mind Gem that gives the Dark Golem such a powerful healing power. Only with the power of the same source, the words and expressions will be so huge with consumption. Thinking of this, Lin's face turned ugly. But immediately saw Thor, the Hulk who were beating the puppet, and Steve, Tony and others who were entangled with it. The eyes lit up instantly. The opponent's strong healing power. 18. As long as you don't take the opponent's healing power hard and start from the side, won't you get it? Thinking of this, Lin Yan shouted to Thor and the others who were fighting. Thor, Steve, pay attention. 3 seconds later, you retreat quickly, and I will deal with this. 3, 2, 1. Lin just finished reading. Thor, Steve and the others quickly got rid of the puppet in front of them and came to Lin. Seeing the dark puppet chasing head-on, Lin waved his hands and said lightly, "Space cage." In an instant, in front of everyone, a silver-white light passed by. The dark puppet that was attacking forward stopped in place in an instant, although the footsteps still kept rushing forward. But it didn't move even a centimeter away. No matter whether the other party goes forward, backward, left or right, they cannot leave the current position at all. When Lin saw the effect, she nodded in satisfaction. Although it cannot directly limit the healing rate of the dark puppet, it is no problem to limit his mobility. The puppet is strong, and the real combat ability is very general, otherwise it will not be entangled with Steve. Just by gently casting a space cage, they can be locked in a fixed miniature space. In this space, distance is meaningless. Even if you run 100 kilometers, you are equivalent to running in circles, and you cannot do without this space. Until the energy is exhausted, it will die. Seeing that the dark puppet was resolved, Lin nodded slightly. Walking towards the floor-to-ceiling windows not far away, everyone followed closely behind. Through the broken floor-to-ceiling windows, everyone could clearly see 3 black holes appearing over New York City outside. At the same time, a large number of alien warriors attacked the city with equipment similar to air motorcycles. For a while, New York City was under fire, and ruins were everywhere. Advertisement. Seeing this, everyone's face showed anger. Then look at Lin. Without a word, Lin directly opened a portal to the frontline battlefield. Everyone entered in turn. After entering the front line of the battlefield, looking at the other side is a bit like an ant, very ugly, like a transformed alien warrior. Without waiting for the opponent to react, he immediately launched an attack. Thor directly summoned thunder, and at the same time charged forward with Mjolnir in his hand. The Tony Stark Alliance turned on the various attack devices in the armor and shot frantically around. Bruce Banner directly transformed into the Hulk, like stepping on a bug, killing the alien warriors one by one. Steve, Black Widow, Barton and others also rushed forward and launched their own battles. Lin, who was standing behind him, sighed slightly as he watched a large number of Zeta Swiss soldiers rushing down from the sky. Then he said in a low voice, "Rapid blades." A large amount of wealth was consumed by the general trend, and a large number of visible energy fluctuations appeared in the air. Soon, in the eyes of New York citizens, a large number of dark blue wind blades appeared in the sky. Then it rushed towards the Zeta Swiss soldiers in the sky. In an instant, as the large wind blades passed through the enemy at high speed, as if cutting wheat, a large number of Zeta Swiss soldiers suddenly separated from their limbs, and some even turned into pieces and fell to the ground. Immediately, the sky was clear and there were no half-enemies. For a time, the green blood and wreckage of Cheetah Rui 0.8 soldiers covered the entire frontline battlefield. A strange stench pervaded the surroundings. Seeing this scene, Thor, Steve, Tony and others were stunned, but their faces were filled with joy. Soon, an answer came to his mind. Promoted to the 5th rank, speaking with the law. However, they blocked the attack of a large number of Zeta Swiss soldiers. Although the attack just now was very effective, it only involved the area in front of him. New York is the other area still under threat from the Zetas. It feels great to have such a powerful teammate on your side. Thinking of this, Lin thought to himself, what is the optimal solution? But Lin frowned slightly. Chapter 191 The Power of the Source of the Soul. Irony Loki. With his current 4th order ability to speak the law, can easily wipe out a large number of Zeta Swiss soldiers on the frontline battlefield. If he can be promoted to the 5th rank, his strength will skyrocket, and it should be no problem to suppress a city. Thoughts turned, Lin shouted to Thor, Steve and others not far away. Steve, Thor, you keep fighting. I'm going to look for Loki to see if I can close the wormhole above and solve the disaster at the root. I have already sent Xingyao's fighters to come, they are not weak and can fight side by side with you. Hearing Lin's call, Steve and the others looked at each other and said in unison. Okay, Lin, you go do your thing, it's up to us here. As soon as the voice fell, Steve found that a large number of portals with sparks appeared out of thin air on their battlefield. Soon, a large number of Xingyao fighters wearing black special uniforms stepped out of the portal to participate in the battle. Immediately surprised. Seeing this, Lin felt slightly relieved, and with a wave of his hand, he instantly opened a portal and walked straight in. O2 go back to the lounge on the top floor of the Stark building. Looking at the dark puppet warrior who was still running desperately in front of him, but didn't move at all. Lin frowned slightly, thinking in her eyes. The appearance of the dark puppet from here means that Loki must have been here. Just don't know when Loki will leave. But, Lin looked up at the 3 wormholes over New York and thought silently. Now Loki is temporarily unable to control the space gem, and cannot perform long-distance space movement at all. In addition, with his arrogant character, he won't run away directly. He should be watching this big drama somewhere. So, Loki must be in New York City. 55. And it must be in a position where, looking at the big picture, there is some meaning. The brain is constantly running, excluding locations in New York. Soon, Lin's eyes lit up. He thought of a most suitable location. Advertisement. Statue of Liberty, New York. New York, Statue of Liberty. In a war-torn New York, there was a lot of noise everywhere, and people's roar, shouts and howls could be heard wherever they went. A large number of other Swiss soldiers, constantly firing around. The same is true under the Statue of Liberty, the symbol of the United States as a whole. Under the pedestal of the tall Statue of Liberty, a large number of the United States people hid in the houses below, while outside, 2s and 3s of Zeta Swiss soldiers, constantly armed with laser guns, smashed everywhere, killing the running people. For a while, the noise below the Statue of Liberty was in sharp contrast to the smiling face of the Statue of Liberty. On top of the head crown of the Statue of Liberty, with a golden helmet with antlers and a pale golden armor, Loki stands in it. His attitude was full of arrogance. He looked at the massive killing below, and then looked at the massive Zeta Swiss soldiers gushing out from the 3 wormholes above the sky. Reaching out his hands, Roar shouted loudly. Liberate, my people of Midgard. Your king will show you the most real world. At this moment, Loki, wanton insolent, his face is full of the taste of extreme enjoyment. Because, having reached such a situation, he really couldn't imagine who could destroy it. He felt that the victory was in his hands, and he was only one step away from becoming a king. Just waiting for the ants who call themselves Avengers to be wiped out under the siege of Zeta Swiss soldiers. He can then ascend the throne, lead Midgard, and look at the position of the Lord of the Nine Realms. As for his trashy brother, ha ha, sudden, Loki instantly felt a wave of energy behind him, and just turned around to find Lin stepping out of the portal. Looking at Lin wearing a black trench coat and exuding the breath of a ruler, Loki's face was slightly ugly. He could just see the terrifying scene of Lin summoning a large number of wind blades, like a storm, strangling a large number of Zeta Swiss soldiers. But still asked, if you're not wrong, you're Lin Duncan. I know you, if it wasn't for the last time I was involved, I might be the king of Asgard now. I'm curious, how did you know I was here? Lin looked at Loki in front of him silently, put his eyes on the spiritual scepter beside him, and said with disdain. Loki, you're too easy to read. With your superficial, arrogant, stupid personality, anyone can guess where you will be. 5. Hearing the disdain in Lin's voice, Loki's eyes flashed with anger. Advertisement. Seems to know to go on, may not be able to say. So Loki held the mind scepter directly and pointed at Lin. In an instant, a gray-green light shot towards Lin's position. Space refraction. A faint voice sounded. In an instant, the space in front of Lin began to materialize like glass, and the attack that had just arrived was instantly refracted by the glass-like space in front of him. Seeing that Lin was motionless and unharmed, Loki's face became even more difficult to look at. So he controlled the mind scepter several times in a row and launched a violent attack on Lin. But basically none of them posed much of a threat to Lin. Suddenly 390. Lin turned her head and looked to the left, with a half-smiling smile on her face, and said softly. Appear. Confinement. 39. Accompanied by 2 rays of light, 1 white and 1 gold. A figure appeared in front of Lin's left. It was Loki, who was holding a psychic scepter in a sneak attack. Looking at the 2 locusts across from him and in front of him, Lin had a disdainful smile on his face. At the moment, a faint voice came from Loki's ear, his tone full of mockery. Loki, you're always so petty. A villain who will only act in secret and play tricks. It won't be on the table after all. Hearing the disdain and sarcasm in his voice, Loki instantly exploded with anger and his eyes turned red. His whole body was bound by pale golden silk threads, restricting his movement and motionless. Couldn't even open his mouth. All he could do was stare at Lin with red eyes, full of anger. Lin saw it and didn't care. If he hadn't been Asgard's second prince, Thor's younger brother, he would have killed him long ago. However, now the most important thing is, Lin set her eyes on the mind scepter held in Loki's right hand, her eyes full of fire. The power of the source of the mind. With the opportunity of promotion, the Fifth Order language is coming. Chapter 192, The Avengers Falling Down. Roar, roar, roar. Huge amounts of roars sounded throughout the frontline battlefield. The Hulk, incarnated by Bruce Banner, with his huge body and powerful strength, lifted the unmanned vehicle next to him. Like throwing an iron ball, it is thrown upwards. Smash one Zeta Swiss soldier after another. Sudden. See the huge Chidori alien battleship coming towards you. Roar, roar, roar. The Hulk slapped his chest frantically, let out huge amounts of roar, and strode forward. One punch. In an instant, the violent power and roar's whistling wind formed deafening tearing air sounds. Hulk punches the entire alien battleship in one punch. Block its forward trend abruptly. Then, as if throwing a disc, he grabbed the head of the battleship tightly with both hands, spun it around, and threw it to the ground like throwing garbage. After falling to the ground, a jump landed on the surface of the battleship. Boom. Kaka kaka. Relying on the violent power, he stepped on the battleship with heavy feet, constantly crashing into various parts of the battleship. Soon, this huge amount of alien warship completely stopped running and perished. Roar. Seeing this, the Hulk stood at the top of the battleship and let out a deafening roar, as if to show off his trophies. Seeing this, a large number of Zeta Swiss soldiers were very frightened and avoided the location of the Hulk. But soon, a large number of well-equipped Zeta Swiss soldiers attacked the Hulk. They seemed to be hunters who are skilled in hunting. With the help of the suspended flight device, they constantly move quickly at high altitudes to avoid attacks. At the same time besiege the Hulk underground. Not far away, a lot of thunder continued to flash from the sky. Boom. Advertisement. Huge amounts of the sound of thunder carried through the sky. Above the sky, large tracts of dark clouds continued to gather, and the roar of thunder was deafening. Almost every second, a large number of thunders crashed down, splitting the Zeta Swiss soldiers in the sky into coke and falling to the ground. Although a lot of thunder continued to emerge, the Zeta Swiss soldiers fell like raindrops. But compared to the other Swiss soldiers constantly pouring out of the wormhole, it seems like a drop in the bucket, and it is generally not helpful. Iron Man Tony saw the Zeta Swiss soldiers rushing out, and quickly aroused a large number of missiles in the armor, constantly attacking in the direction of the wormhole. At the same time, the rest of the armor is summoned, and a large amount of ammunition and missiles are released to attack. But compared to the huge number of enemies, the number of annihilations was insignificant, like a drop in the bucket. Thor saw this scene and wanted to attack the source of the enemy, the wormhole. But was entangled by a large number of well-equipped Zeta Swiss soldiers around. Often just after flying less than 100 meters, they were repelled by a large number of lasers and artillery shells. However, the people of New York City are in much better shape now than they were before. Because a large number of Xingyao fighters are distributed on various main streets. They have used their powers to protect the people of New York. Everyone could see that from time to time a huge amount of earth wall appeared not far from the sky or a large number of lasers on the side. Although the earth wall will soon be broken, but soon, new earth walls are formed in an instant. At the same time, flames, ice, thunder and other various forces are rampant on the streets. The Zeta Swiss soldiers flying above the sky are fine, evading a lot of power attacks. But the Zeta Swiss soldiers who fell under the ground, armed with firearms, attacked recklessly, and destroyed, were killed by a large number of power attacks. Even in the face of huge alien warships, dozens of Earth elementalists joined forces to summon huge amounts of earth and stone hands and grab them on the ground. Immediately afterwards, a large number of space system power users joined forces to distort the space, and the entire alien battleship was destroyed. As for the Zeta Swiss soldier floating at high altitude and riding a suspended motorcycle, it is actually not good. Every now and then a wind blade, lightning strike, and fireball hit them. A careless, direct machine crash. Although a large number of Zeta Swiss soldiers were jointly killed by Xingyao soldiers, their own losses were not small. Basically, every Xingyao warrior is more or less covered with scars and stained with a lot of dark green blood, which is the blood of Zeta Swiss soldiers. Advertisement. But at the same time, there are bright red bloodstains mixed in it, some are the blood of their own injuries, and some are the traces of the death of their companions. However, because Xingyao was prepared in advance, awakening a large number of healing power users. Although many star warriors were seriously injured and had no combat ability, they at least saved a small life. Therefore, there are also dead star warriors, but not many, and more are brought back to the rear for recuperation. However, with the increasing number of Zeta Swiss soldiers, Xingyao soldiers also began to show signs of being unable to hold on. Losses are getting bigger and bigger. Captain America Steve, Black Widow Natasha Romanoff, Hawkeye Barton, who were fighting, felt that the situation was at a disadvantage at the moment, and their hearts sank slightly. Backquote. Captain, have you contacted Lin? How is the situation now? Can the wormhole above be solved? 99. Hearing a series of questions from Natasha Romanoff not far away, Steve shook his head and replied loudly. Lin said he was trying to figure it out. Let's hold back a little longer, he can break the situation very soon. Hearing Steve's loud reply, Natasha Romanoff and Barton's hearts shook slightly, and their hands and feet became more forceful. Soon, Steve's news spread through the communication channel, and everyone was excited. As if to know that their hope is coming. Lin at the moment, standing on the crown of the Statue of Liberty. Staring closely at the mind gem floating in front of him, his hands glowed with pale golden light, covering the entire mind gem. Honorable, as if drawing some power. And Loki, not far from him, has a lot of golden and sharp silk threads on his body, and a drop of bright red blood occasionally appears on the threads. Blood droplets dripped to the ground along the silk thread, and on the ground, bright red blood scattered all around. At this moment, Loki, motionless. As if he knew that as long as he moved, he would suffer huge amounts of damage, and even face the risk of death. But he still looked at Lin Duncan opposite him with angry eyes. At this moment, Lin perceives the situation on the battlefield that is at a disadvantage, and perceives the star warriors who are wearing more and more. Between his frowning brows, he could clearly see the anxiety in his heart at the moment. But he still held his breath, because a light curtain appeared in front of his eyes. The power of the source of the soul, the countdown to draw is 45 seconds. It is expected that in 1 minute, he will be successfully promoted to the 5th rank. Chapter 193 6 Nuclear Bombs. Choppy Politicians. Shield Aviation. Carrier Base. Nick Fury looked at the projections of several figures in front of him in the conference room of the base, and his face became more and more ugly. Nick Fury, as the SHIELD director, this is a serious dereliction of duty. Director Nick Fury, look at what you've done, the alien invasion. If it hadn't already happened, how long were you going to hide it from us? As I said, Nick Fury is too thoughtful. Look, Pierce had an accident this time because of the alien invasion. If we didn't ask, he didn't mention a word. Stop talking about this. How do you want to solve this alien invasion of New York? It's not far from Washington. The battlefield spreads to Washington. A little damage will cause the entire country to be paralyzed. It must be prevented in advance. Yes, although I feel very sorry for such a thing in New York, but the danger cannot be allowed to expand again, and it must be contained as much as possible. 5. I propose the use of nuclear bombs. 3 wormholes appear, and I propose 6 nuclear bombs. Can consider it. Agree. Hurry up and execute. Now the aliens have the upper hand. 39. Nick Fury looked at the projections in front of him. You said, I discussed it, completely ignoring him, and his face became more and more ugly. 390 Gentlemen, The nuclear bomb cannot be used, and tens of millions of residents are still in New York. You are a waste of life. Rest assured, I have received news that the battlefield situation will soon usher in a turning point. I believe Avengers will not disappoint everyone. Hearing Fury's warning tone, the projections of many big shots were not there at all, but they directly refuted them. What are you talking about? Why did the aliens invade New York? You haven't made it clear yet. Now talk to me about the turning point of the situation. Can you afford the responsibility? Everyone has seen the situation now. Soon, aliens will completely occupy the whole of New York, and the next step will be to look at Washington. This is the political lifeline of our country. Once it falls, the consequences will be unimaginable. 99. Raise your hands. I agree to the use of nuclear bombs. 35. I agree. Agree. Quote. Nick Fury's face darkened as he watched the 10 projections representing the ruling class of the United States express their approval. As if you saw Nick Fury's disapproving attitude, an old man in the lead said loudly. Nick Fury, I inform you in the will of the Congress of the United States to obey orders. After Nick Fury heard it, he snorted coldly, knowing that it was useless to say more, so he turned and left. Advertisement. Out of sight, out of mind. They want to do it, and they are not vegetarians themselves. If you really launch a nuclear bomb, then you are absolutely dead, and you have to bear all the blame. Nick Fury walked out of the command room and toward the viewing area. The situation is now with the Avengers on the back foot, and while Lynn says it's about to hit a turning point, it's better to watch for yourself. Sudden. Beep. 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 Sir, it's not good. The people in Congress passed us and launched nuclear bombs directly. A total of 6 nuclear bombs were launched. The process of going through is still our shield. Damn it. These chops. 35. Nick Fury heard Hill's voice on the walkie-talkie, cursed secretly, and said in a hurried tone. You continue to watch the battle, remember to collect evidence, this matter has nothing to do with our shield. At the same time, he picked up the walkie-talkie in his hand and spoke in a hurried tone to Lynn's communication channel. Lynn, it's not good, the bastards in Congress actually fired 6 nuclear bombs, can you sustain it? 39. Can't take it anymore, tell Tony and the others to evacuate. Hey, after only Lynn above the head of the goddess heard it, he sighed deeply. Damn the United States, that group of timid politicians, as he expected, regardless of the safety of tens of millions of people, they just launched nuclear bombs. It also fired 6 pieces, which is really a bunch of junk. But, looking at the prompt message that appeared on the system page, Lynn's mouth twitched slightly. Ding, the power of the source of the soul has been successfully extracted. Currently, space, time, spiritual power, and 100 billion wealth value have been reserved. 55. Excuse me if you are promoted to rank 5 and speak the law. Lynn looked at the pale yellow source power that appeared in front of her eyes, heard the sound coming from her ear, the corners of her mouth twitched slightly, and then she directly ordered the system. Quote exclamation mark exclamation mark exclamation mark quote. Advertisement. Ding, the promotion starts, the countdown is 10 seconds. Looking at the continuously sliding countdown, a sneer appeared on Lynn's face, and he spoke into the walkie-talkie in a deep voice. Fury can rest assured that even if the nuclear bomb is sent out, it will not affect you. You continue to observe the battlefield and communicate in time if there is any unexpected situation. 99. After speaking, hang up the walkie-talkie directly. Far in the sky, Nick Fury's face was cloudy when he heard it. He naturally believed what Lynn said. Because the Lynn he knew, is definitely not the kind of person who insists and wants to face. When it's time to withdraw, definitely withdraw earlier than anyone else. With such a confident tone now, I'm afraid. Nuclear bombs are no longer a threat to them. In this case, the communication and negotiation method with Lynn should be changed later. Lynn was not surprised by the launch of the nuclear bomb. In his previous life, he learned through the plot that the United States fired nuclear bombs without any scruples. Naturally, the same thing would happen in the same situation. Although he fired 6 at once, it was a bit beyond his surprise. 18. The fifth order words and deeds are enough to suppress all disasters. I dare not say that it has the power to destroy the star, but it definitely has the power to destroy the country. Well, the nuclear bomb, if it really exploded, he must hide as far away as possible. But before it broke out, it was a lump of iron. Lynn looked in the direction of Washington, as if he could see those scumbag politicians sitting in Congress who had no scruples to launch nuclear bombs, and a sneer flashed in his eyes. Immediately, set your eyes on the system interface in front of you. System promotion countdown 3, 2, 1. Congratulations to the host, the fifth order words follow the success. Supernatural powers, speaking and speaking are further integrated into the host's soul. Wealth consumption is further reduced. The system function is turned on. Dimension Shuttle. Chapter 194 The Great Prophecy. The fifth order words follow the law. Roar, roar, roar. The 6 nuclear bombs drew 6 white lines in the sky. After approaching, the roar whistling that cut through the sky can be clearly heard. Lynn stood in midair, watching the 3 nuclear bombs heading for the wormhole, and the 3 nuclear bombs heading for New York. His eyes were indifferent, but there was a hint of disgust. Nausea. It's so disgusting. Pulling out the guise of safeguarding national interests, it doesn't care about the lives of tens of millions of people. But, fortunately, he was prepared. The Fifth Order words come out with the law. It is enough on Earth to suppress everything, dissatisfaction. Looking at the 6 nuclear bombs getting closer and closer, Lin stretched out his right hand, opened his palm, and squeezed lightly against the nuclear bombs. Said indifferently. Time forbid. In Lin's eyes, the world is silent, gray is the main color of at the moment, everything is motionless, as if coming to a world where time is still. At the same time, a transparent ripple covered the galloping 6 nuclear bombs. Then with a flick, the nuclear bomb disappeared in midair in an instant and entered his storage space. Immediately afterwards, the gray disappeared quietly, everything was re-rendered in color, the sound of roars whistling wind, and the sound of guns below, gradually sounded. It seems that at this moment, the world is back to normal. The people below only saw that the sky stopped abruptly because of the white line of the nuclear bomb, or disappeared in an instant. Before he had time to think deeply, he continued to fight. But Tony, who was reminded by Nick Fury, knew this scene immediately. Quickly shouted to Lin on the communication channel. Lin, the nuke just disappeared, did you do it? 55. Answer quickly. Hearing Tony's surprised and hurried voice, Lin's mouth twitched slightly and replied lightly. Definitely, Tony. Immediately afterwards, he opened the full channel communication and said to everyone. Everyone has worked hard. Now, everyone can have a good rest. Witness with your own eyes, the destruction of the enemy. Advertisement. As soon as the voice fell, Lin flew to the middle of the 3 wormholes. Looking at the 3 wormholes in a circle, the corners of his mouth twitched slightly, staring at the wormhole in front of him. The hand slid along a strange trajectory, while Lin said softly. Array. Space shatter. In an instant, the wormhole on the opposite side, which was continuously gushing out a large number of Zeta Swiss soldiers, suddenly appeared dense red flame-colored gold lines on the surface, covering the entire surface of the wormhole along strange tracks. The Zeta Swiss soldiers, who were rushing towards the Earth through the wormhole, just crossed the golden line area, as if they had been attacked by a large number of cuttings. The body instantly decomposed into small pieces, and then quickly disappeared. As the Zeta Swiss soldiers in the wormhole continue to rush towards the Earth, what is ushered in is not a new Earth, but a large number of space cuts, or death. The dust from the corpse kept falling to the ground one after another. The Zeta Swiss soldiers who entered before the formation of the formation saw this scene, and immediately rushed forward in horror. It was as if there were wild beasts chasing after him. For a moment, the Avengers below the ground were clearly visible. Originally, the 3 wormholes represented 3 torrents of Zeta Swiss soldiers, and one of them disappeared instantly. Everyone's confidence was revived. Lin nodded slightly when she saw this scene. Then set your sights on the wormhole on the left. Another round of space-smashing formation blockade, one less torrent of Kurita soldiers. Immediately after the wormhole on the right was blocked again, at this moment, the other Swiss soldiers on the Earth no longer had any supplements. However, this group of alien invaders at the moment, as if aware of the current predicament, like crazy, constantly shooting at surrounding buildings in midair. For a time, the entire New York City was under fire. There are ruins everywhere. Standing in the sky, looking at New York City where artillery fire roared and buildings collapsed. Listening to the miserable, wailing voices of New York City citizens came from below. Lin frowned slightly, his thoughts turned, his hands were pressed down heavily, and at the same time, a loud voice spread throughout New York. I said. Flights are prohibited here. In an instant, the other Swiss soldiers who were attacking recklessly on hoverbikes fell to the ground. 90% of Zeta Swiss soldiers were seriously injured or killed by this fall. However, watching the Zeta Swiss soldiers keep attacking with firearms, Lin's loud voice was heard over New York once again. I said. No harm here. 99. This time, a dazzling silver light covered the entire New York City. 0. Ask for flowers 0. Advertisement. Every New Yorker, including the Avengers, had a white light film on the body of the Zeta Swiss soldiers. They were surprised to find that whether it was bullets, lasers, or sputtering projectiles, they were all offset by the white light film. Didn't get hurt in the slightest. Immediately surprised. Immediately afterwards, a loud voice sounded again from the sky. I say. The soul of the intruder is dead. The voice just fell, and everyone saw a gray light mist appearing on the Zeta Swiss soldier. After dissipating, it suddenly dumped to the ground, motionless, as if death. This moment, as if to know the end of this war, the residents of New York City are full of surprised cheers. 0. Tony's startled roar sounded in Lin's ears. FK. Lin, you're a big prophecy. We won, we won, we won. Soon, the celebratory voices of everyone in the Avengers were heard from the communication channel. Thor and Iron Man Tony hurriedly flew in front of Lin and said excitedly. Lin, it's so powerful. Lin raised her eyebrows slightly, her tone also a little joyful. Haha, it should be, it should be. Well, let's get that last hurdle out of the way. 35. With that said, Lin set his sights on the Stark building, where the Tesseract was located. Soon, All Avengers arrived at the Stark building, looking at the round shield of Tesseract light blue in front of them. Some frown. They tried it just now and found that they couldn't break the shield at all, let alone shut down the Tesseract. After Lin arrived, looking at the helpless expressions of everyone, he smiled, stretched out his hand, and took out the spiritual scepter. Then, holding the mind scepter, touching the protective cover, and said lightly, I say, break through defenses, close the wormhole. In an instant, the psychic scepter burst into a dazzling golden light, and then pierced through the entire defensive cover like a broken bamboo. Tap Tesseract. Almost at the same time, the Tesseract burst into indigo light and slowly left the instrument. And the 3 wormholes in the sky are slowly disappearing. Chapter 195 Asgard Teleportation Point. Grace and Power. New York, Kebab Shop. New York, which has just experienced the Zeta Swiss invasion, is full of wreckage and corpses of a large number of Zeta Swiss soldiers. Fortunately, the wormhole in the sky has closed, and the alien invasion is over. Everything will naturally get better. At this moment, Tony, Lin, Thor and other Avengers members gathered in a group to relieve their anxiety before in a barbecue restaurant. Or, have a big meal and enjoy the food. Lin, take Loki this time, please, I'll take him back to Asgard's prison later. Thor took a bite of the beef at hand, chewed it, swallowed it, and said loudly. Good to say, people have been handed over to S.H.I.E.L.D. Just ask them directly. Lin took a sip from the mug of beer on hand and said with a smile. Tisk tisk, thanks to you this time, Lin. 393, haha, Bruce, in fact, I feel that you turned into a Hulk, that's really powerful. Indeed, that muscle is really dazzling. Haha, actually I think Thor is the coolest when he summons thunder. Nonsense, Barton's archery is the most handsome with that focused eye. Don't you realize that the captain is the most handsome when he fights? I found out earlier, haha. Natasha Romanoff, you're the only woman in our Avengers, who's the most handsome, you say. Natasha Romanoff looked at everyone joking around with each other, and a pleasant smile appeared on his face. Facing Tony's question, Natasha Romanoff said jokingly. It goes without saying that I'm definitely the captain, haha, I grew up in the captain's story. Haha, that's ridiculous, actually, everyone in us at Avengers is handsome. This sentence cannot be refuted. Ha ha ha, the captain is right, let's have a toast. With that said, Lin raised the big glass of beer next to him and toasted to everyone at the table. Come on, cheers. 99. Bang, bang, bang. Many wine glasses collided and made a crisp sound, and then everyone sighed. Gollum, Gollum, Gollum. Thor's glass went down at a speed visible to the naked eye in front of the beer, and after a while. Haha, I'm the first to finish drinking. As he said that, Thor turned the glass upside down to show that he drank cleanly. Advertisement. I'm done drinking too, haha, I'm number 3. Soon, the Avengers and his party all drank all the beer from their glasses. Everyone looked at each other and laughed. At this moment, they seemed very comfortable. By the way, Thor, I have something to mention to you, isn't our city of shining stars planning to build our own teleportation system? 35. I'm thinking of opening a teleportation point in Asgard to welcome guests from Asgard. By the way, you and Jane can also meet at any time. 9. You see Asgard is fine, right? Lin, who had just finished drinking a full glass, said jokingly to Thor next to him. It's definitely no problem, I'll talk to my father and Hildem when I go back. Okay, that's trouble, let's not talk about that, let's keep drinking, keep drinking. Yes, the party, don't talk about this, I'll play around first. Haha, yes, Natasha Romanoff, you're such a womanizer. Thank you Lin for the compliment, haha. Drink. Come, drink. For a while, the atmosphere of the entire barbecue restaurant became more and more lively. After a long time, roar, Lin let out a soft sigh and looked at the feast of leftovers on the table, as well as several cases of empty beer bottles on the side. Finally, he looked around for a week, looked at the people who were paralyzed on the chairs, and said with a smile. Okay, looking at everyone's state, they should have eaten and drank enough today. Or, let's go and sing. 35. It just so happens that we have recently opened a KTV in the city of shining stars. The equipment in it is top-notch in the world. More importantly, I also set up some memetic arrays in it. 55. Although it is an illusion, it can let people be in it, and it will be more fun to play. Haha, I've been wanting to sing for a long time. Go, Lin, go to your City of Stars KTV. 35. Go, go, go. As a portal opened, everyone returned to the City of Stars. 2 days later, the Trident building of the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters. Thor walked out to the clearing with a suitcase and Loki with both hands in shackles. Behind the Avengers and Lin, Nick Fury and others followed. Zero. Advertisement. Thor stood on the lawn, beckoned to the crowd, and called to Lin. Lin, what you say will be with Father and with Hildem. I'll come back to your City of Stars in a while. Hearing this, Lin nodded with a smile. Hildem. Boom. With Thor's loud roar, Bifrost's teleportation beam of light descended, instantly appearing in everyone's eyes. Soon, the beam of light disappeared along with Thor and Loki, and only the lawn left a big mark. Seeing this, Avengers and others called roar and scattered, more or less they had their own affairs. And Lin followed Nick Fury into the Trident building and into his director's office. Director Nick Fury, how's your Hydra cleaning up? Do you still need my help? Lin looked at Nick Fury in the chair and said with a smile. Don't worry, Hydra will be able to hide, and now that it's all exposed, naturally none of them can escape. 35. Hearing this, Lin chuckled. Only then did he hold on to one of Pierce's snake heads, and the Hydra snake heads elsewhere had not been caught yet. However, he didn't even have the desire to talk about this topic, so he changed the subject and said. Okay, your matter has been resolved, now you should talk about our City of Stars. 5. 0.8 Hearing this, Nick Fury smiled, with a cunning light in his eyes. Then, I heard, by the way, I removed the Hydra people from the list of abilities that you gave me earlier. If you feel anyone is available, I'll add them. Hearing this, Nick Fury's face stiffened. He still didn't understand Lin's suggestion. It doesn't mean that he has a detailed list of HYDRA's large-scale infiltration into S.H.I.E.L.D., which is his handle. This is the threat. Then he also proposed a list of enabling abilities, which is the temptation of interest. This is a method of enmity and power that he is very familiar with. It's a bit old-fashioned, but it works. After thinking about it, he said with a smile. Lin, don't worry,